republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Legal notice. The Ledyard Town Council will conduct a public hearing at 6:15 p.m. on Wednesday, February the 12th, 2020, in the Council Chambers, Town Hall Annex, 741 Colonel Ledyard Highway, Ledyard, Connecticut, to receive comment on the following. 1, an ordinance regarding control of dogs in parks and recreational areas, school property, and the historic district. Amendments, number 2 is amendments to ordinance number 400-007, formerly 146, an ordinance regarding waste management and recycling in the town of Ledyard. And 3, amendments to ordinance number 300-027, formerly 152, an ordinance regulating parking and other activities in town roads and right-of-ways and providing penalties for the violation thereof. At this hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard, and written communications will be accepted. Dated at Ledyard, Connecticut, this 30th day of January, 2020, for the Ledyard Town Council, Linda C. Davis, Chairman, and this was published in the New London Day on February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. The procedure here, we have 3, 1 ordinance, 2 amendments. So we'll start with Councilor Ingalls will present the ordinance regarding control of dogs.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the entire proposed ordinance. It's available online if you'd like to read it. The draft ordinance is in response to a couple of incidences on public lands where roaming dogs, unleashed dogs, attacked somebody else's animal that was on a leash. And so we were asked if we could do something to address this. State statute does address roaming, but also leaves it to the municipality to do anything further if that seems prudent. And so the highlights of this ordinance are that it would require that, well, I'll read you the purpose statement. The purpose of this ordinance is to provide regulations regarding the restraint, control, and leashing of dogs or other domestic animals for the welfare and safety on all public lands, including any park, beach, field, or other recreation area under the control of the Ledyard Department of Parks and Recreation, or at any school property under the control of the Ledyard Board of Education, or at any historic district property under the control of the Ledyard Historic District Commission, or any open space property under the control of the town of Ledyard. So basically, your animal has to be on a leash and within 10 feet of you. I think that's probably enough to go on.
Okay, so the procedure will be, we will not be voting this evening. You will, we will ask if you have input or questions, discussions. We will then adjourn, send it back to admin if there's any changes based on your comments. We also got several letters, and we'll take that into consideration. But just so you know, we don't vote, we won't be voting on it this evening. We'll be taking input. So if anybody has anything to say at this time, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Only 3 minutes? Goodness. My name is Elizabeth LaRose. I live at 2 Oak Hills Drive. Oak Hills Trail, excuse me, here in Ledyard. Almost a 20-year member of town, a dog owner, twice over. Part of control of your dog is to have them licensed, to have their rabies shots and all the necessary things, and to have control of your animal. I live on a street that's a dead end. I walk my dog to the end and walk back. I have been chased by the same dog to my porch. I have been chased by the dog halfway up to my driveway, and I've been bitten by the same dog. It's been reported to the town. When the dog did bite me, there's 2 dogs, one bit me, the other one didn't, just was harassing me. And I was on somebody else's property without my dog, doing absolutely nothing but sitting there talking to my neighbor when they arrived through the gate with their dogs off leash, and the dogs just went after me and bit me. I was fed up because that was the second time something happened. They came and took the dogs, did whatever they had to do. But I was furious. Well, about a month and a half ago, I was walking down Common Place, right on the road here at Ledyard, right on my street, and I'm walking my dog on lead. The dogs come chasing out of the house after me. My dog is also trained. I took her off lead, sent her home. She goes right home. Those dogs just chased me up the street, about halfway, with the owner, once again, like all the other times, saying, "Come here, Oscar, come here, Oscar, come, Oscar." No control, dogs are running, ignoring them. I think there needs to be something done further than this last time. There's, excuse the pun, no bite in the law at all for me as a consumer. I got bit. I got chased twice, up to my porch with my dog. Not just an open space, not just in the Parks and Rec, but on the common street here in Ledyard. And I was told, oh, don't change your pattern, you should just go down the street. If it happens again, call us. 3 times. I'm tired of it. Something needs to be done.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments, and good job staying within 3 minutes.
I didn't even have a clock, it was behind me.
Any other comments at this time? Yes, Scott.
All right. My name is Scott Johnson. I'm the Parks and Rec Director. I am in favor of the ordinance, but I would like to request that there's some additional language put in, possibly in Section 3, to state that dogs are not permitted in the playgrounds, on athletic fields, basketball, tennis courts, bathing areas, or at the beach at Highlands Lake. We spend a lot of money as the town to maintain our athletic fields, and the dog waste has some very negative effects to our fields. We spend about $48,500 just to manage our turf, and we spend another $46,000 cutting it. And then we have $80,000 we spend on a maintenance guy that does have some crossover onto the fields as well. So we do have a significant investment there. The dog waste is toxic for the grass. It causes burns and unsightly discolorations because the dog urine is rich in nitrogen. Nitrogen is good for the grass. It is used in fertilizer in a certain amount, but to excess it actually kills the turf off. And then also the urine contains salts and other compounds that mess with the pH of the soil, which we put a lot of effort into maintaining our soil levels to a certain point so that it's conducive to grow the turf grass. We're not asking that they're not allowed in the parks, just that they not be allowed on the athletic fields themselves, or in the playscapes with the wood chips, because if a dog does go to the bathroom in there, I believe that makes the wood chips technically toxic, and we would have to replace them. I think that's pretty much. And then also with the fecal matter from the dogs as well, it's a safety issue with the kids, because when the dog goes to the bathroom, especially with the younger kids, they're usually out in left field picking daisies and then sticking their fingers in their mouth. And it's like, I think 1 gram of dog waste contains 23 million fecal chloroform bacteria, which causes cramps, diarrhea, intestinal illness, serious kidney disorders, and then also it's an issue with the mowing as well, because it messes with the blades, and especially with the turf grass when we have to go to lower cuts, it can affect the cutting ability when the blades are dull. I think that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you. Do you want to email that language to Roxanne? Yeah.
I already gave it to her.
Oh, okay. You're good. Wow.
And I'm not as concerned about the bathing areas, but that's a pretty generic thing across the state, so I figured to keep, with what other towns in the state does in our parks. This makes a lot of sense, because Ledyard Lake does test that facility on that water.
Anybody else like to speak on this ordinance? Yes.
Can I speak?
On this ordinance, yes.
Vincent Godino, 1906 Center Groton Road. I'm also chairman of the Historic District Commission, and I'm here to strongly endorse this ordinance. Many years ago, the Historic District Commission implemented its own set of rules for use of the property. And one of those rules was have your dog on a leash. And I think many people go by that, abide by it, think it's reasonable, but not everyone. Not everyone. And within the past year, we had 2, I would say, serious incidents with dogs off leash. A woman was bitten, and another dog owner that had his dog on leash, that dog was attacked by a dog that was off leash. 2 incidents of that nature, as far as I'm concerned, are too many. The rule that we have, that the commission has for the property, is unenforceable. I mean, we put it out there hoping people would abide by it, but the commission has no authority, neither does the animal control officer, as I understand it, to impose any penalties or fines for people that don't abide by that, or to, in the extreme, I would think with a perpetual violator, to ban them and their dog from the property. This ordinance gives that authority to the town. And I think that's, at the addition of that, I believe will help bring more and more of our visitors into compliance with the leash law. You know, I was thinking there's another benefit to this leash law that occurred to me when I was kind of thinking about tonight what I might say. An ancillary benefit. The field, south field in front of the house, is used extensively by families and kids for picnics, games. They come and play games, and it's a great, you know, spot for things like that. So we have a rule that when your dog poops, you gotta pick it up. Okay, we have a dispenser there at field that's available, and there's a can to deposit it in. But when I think about it, if you have a dog on your leash, it's hard to miss the fact that he did something, and you're also responsible for it. If the dog is loose, running down in the field, 200 yards from where you are, and amongst the cedar trees where you can't see him, I mean, and he does his business, it's not gonna, you're not gonna pick it up. It's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. The only way you'd be able to find it from that distance is if you went out and stepped in it. Okay, that's about it. So
This has been far more graphic.
I mean,
than I anticipated.
I mean, I think this will result in a more sanitary situation for the grounds. It's ancillary to the main purpose, which is to have people come and be safe, not have to worry about them or their kids or their animal being attacked by another animal. There's one suggestion or a question on this. It has a 10-foot maximum length of leash, and I think that might be too high. I'm thinking it might be better to reduce it to something like 6 feet or 7 feet. And the reason I say that is that's probably okay in the big open spaces around the house where you got lots of room. So you and I can be 20 feet apart with our animals, and there's no problem. But when you're walking on the trails, okay, that becomes a little bit more difficult to keep that distance. And I think a shorter leash.
Okay, we'll
I
take that
stopped-
into
I stopped bu-
advisement.
Yep, I'm
Are you
sorry.
wrapping up? I'm sorry.
You're wrapping up, right?
You're well beyond your 3 minutes.
Just for your information, I stopped by Bluff Point today. They have rules. and they have 7 foot. And that's a state-owned EPA control, and they're, which seems like a more reasonable number to me.
Got it?
So,
Got it.
Very good. Thank you.
all right.
Anyone else like to speak at this time? Thank you. 3-minute limit.
I'll be quick.
No, you don't have to be quick. You only have to be 3 minutes.
Okay, so it's Rebecca Ledyard, it's 153 Vinegar Hill Road. So I've had the honor of being the caretaker of the Lasser House for about 2.5 years now, and in this time we've had countless incidents of unleashed dogs every day. And now that we've become more popular and our amazing trail system is getting a lot more visitors, having unleashed dogs creates quite a problem for us. We've had countless incidents that where people have had their dogs off leashes and in the big field and not realize that somebody else has had their dog off leash in that field. And there's been some pretty tense moments of them trying to get their dogs back on leash. We also have somebody who frequents property with a 100-foot rope, which I've actually seen him get tangled in his own rope. So how much control can you really have if you don't have your dog on a leash? I've also been trapped in my own car with a growling, barking dog outside that their owner was on the trail and the dog got ahead of them and trapped me into my car. My kids have been chased. Most recently was last week. I was feeding the kids chickens inside the net fence and an unleashed dog tried to come underneath the net fence after the chickens. And I had the baby on my back, so I was powerless to be able to do anything in that situation. We've also had incidents of unleashed dogs going after the wildlife on the property. We had a groundhog last year who actually abandoned her babies in the field, and we had to leave them. We called the rehabilitator, and they told us to leave them. And then after a bunch of hours, she called back, and she said, "Are they still there?" And I had to drive them up to Lebanon to a rehabilitator so that they would have died in the field alone. We've also had dogs run after in neighborhoods that have gotten off leash and chased deer onto the property, which again is affecting the wildlife in the park, which affects everything. We've also had people having a picnic in the garden and somebody's dog ran across their picnic blanket and helped themselves to their lunch. So, in that instance, and with people with smaller children, I think a leash law would be, or some way to enforce the leash law, an ordinance, would be very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to comment at this
Can I
time?
make a quick comment?
Yes,
if
you
I have
may.
any time left?
Yes.
Actually.
Could you speak at the
Roxanne-
mic though, because that's being recorded from there.
So Roxanne reminded me, we actually already have signs in place at pretty much all of our parks, if not all of them, that say that dogs must be leashed and that you must clean up after them. So we're really in favor for this because we point to the sign and tell people you can't, and they just kind of ignore us. So if there's actual enforcement that comes along with this, then people might actually know some of the rules that we have posted.
Thank you.
Can I
Anyone
make
else?
another comment?
Go right ahead.
Okay, we'll keep 3 minutes though. Okay, because
No,
of
when
these,
you get a second comment, you only get 1 minute.
okay, 3 incidences in my case. Because one incident happened a number of years ago, it didn't count towards doing anything to this person who continually lets their dogs just run crazy. I need a law.
Thank you.
Love me, love my dogs, I don't think so.
Anyone else have any comments on this ordinance?
Mike Morelli, 4 Leabrook Drive. I currently have 2 dogs in my home, both from rescues, as well as a cat who's also a rescue. I've had at least 1 dog in my home for the last 50 years. I'm a member of the New England English Springer Spaniel Rescue. We're dedicated to the rehoming of English Springer Spaniels. With this group, I've participated in fundraising, surrenders, and transport of dogs, as well as home visits with potential adopters and initial evaluation of dogs to be surrendered to us. I've also on a number of occasions conducted home visits with potential adopters with a Connecticut-based labs for rescue. My My lab's very reserved around strangers, so he will not approach it. He gets along very well with other dogs, and he doesn't approach them if they're with their people. He responds well to my commands and sticks close by my side. He comes when called. I feel there's no need to have him on a leash. Under Connecticut state statute, he's under my control. He greatly enjoys his afternoon walks and looks forward to swimming in the lake every day, anytime between March and November. He can't swim on a leash. My retriever mix absolutely loves every person she meets. She's very friendly and gets very excited and wants to meet everyone she sees. Her stay and recall skills are not the best, and I can understand anyone's concern of an unfamiliar 85-pound dog racing towards her. She also plays a bit rough with other dogs. I know many dogs and owners don't appreciate it. In public, I keep her leashed. Again, according to Connecticut state statute, she's under my control. I use a retractable leash that permits her some degree of freedom to wander about and sniff, to be able to be a dog. I know each of my dog's temperament and their shortcomings. I believe that I'm a responsible dog owner. Each individual dog owner should be held accountable for their own pet's behavior. It's not the responsibility of every other pet owner. You need both a carrot and a stick to all human behavior. Having your dog off leash means you need to be responsible. There's a saying that a tired dog is a well-behaved dog. Different dogs require different levels of activity to stay healthy and to reduce stress. Some dog breeds exercise needs can be met with a short walk. Others need a more strenuous daily workout. If they don't receive the exercise they need, they can lead to health problems, stress, and unwanted behavior. Our animal shelters are full of dogs whose owners couldn't deal with their undesirable behaviors. For the most part, Ledyard has narrow, winding roads with no sidewalks, no shoulders. Tell me, where can I walk a dog? Have them play fetch, swim, or receive the amount of exercise they need to be well behaved, to enjoy the full benefits of having a dog. Not everyone has the benefit of a large yard, or any yard at all, and there is no dog park in town. The proposed ordinance penalizes all responsible dog owners and penalizes dogs themselves. It makes no accommodation for certain service dogs who perform their duties while being off leash. Older and young dogs which are being trained to stay, come, etc. One commonly used as a leader that is greater than 10 feet. How are we going to teach them good behavior in public? The proposed ordinance stipulates that anyone in violation of this may be barred from entering town properties. Does this mean that one cannot enter these properties without their dog being leashed, with the dog unleashed, or themselves alone if they, violate it? Would they not be able to attend a sporting event or a meeting on school property without the dog because you've been banned from school, from town property? I truly believe the ordinance is an overreaction to some incidents. I do not doubt that incidents were very upsetting to the individuals involved. Well, did the two dogs, obviously from what I've heard tonight, it has not been the two dogs, there's been other incidences. And again, what other instances? We should not try to legislate a convenient and risk-free life for all. Life has risks and inconveniences. This ordinance, as is now proposed, is a simplistic answer to an issue that requires balance and fairness to all parties concerned. I've heard from some people that the Animal Control Office has no authority to issue citations for unleashed, non-controlled dogs. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe Connecticut General Statutes does convey that authority. If it does not, then yes, the town does need an ordinance in line with state statutes. If the town is concerned with liability, I believe that aligning the town's ordinance with Connecticut General Statutes would be satisfactory. In order to provide a fair and balanced policy, perhaps we can examine some innovative concepts introduced by other communities. From Colorado to Maryland and many municipalities in Massachusetts, they issue off-leash licenses to qualified dog owners. This may also have an effect on increasing the number of dog licenses the town may be able to collect. Certain town properties could be considered off-leash areas. They could be considered off-leash areas during certain times. What I'm asking is, let's look at something innovative rather than a blanket ban or blanket leash law. That's my one comment. Can I have another comment too? Because
Quickly,
we're
please.
party.
Quickly, please.
This comment here was based upon myself personally, my comments. Comments I have are now the discussions with the Conservation Commission last night, because leash law will also cover open spaces. We had a discussion last night, and it was a little contentious. Basically, what we like, the Commission would like, is also to investigate other avenues and other options, rather than this blanket leash.
Thank you. Did the commission vote on that?
We did not vote. It was just
Okay.
an open discussion because we weren't sure whether we want to support, not support.
Okay,
We'd like to see some amendments.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have your comments via
Oh, you did?
Email.
All right.
email,
Yes.
correct,
All right.
thank you. Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Nate Woody, 770 Long Cove Road. So first, I have a set of comments just about how the ordinance is actually written, because I have some concerns about some of the wording in there, so I'll address those first. So first, in the first section, the wording is a little bit strange, where you say it applies to on all public lands. Then you go to list a whole bunch of things that appear to be examples of that, and so it's not clear what exactly do you mean. If you mean all public lands, including public roads and sidewalks, I'd recommend that you state exactly what you mean. And I think what we've already heard from tonight is that trying to apply this as a blanket to all places is probably not the right thing to do. We've heard that there may be different requirements for different locations. I think banning dogs in playgrounds is a great idea. It doesn't have anything to do with the leash law or what's in here right now. So you might want to consider that. In section 2 on authority, you say in accordance with Connecticut Statute 22-364, bullets 1 and 3 aren't authority. So bullets 1 and 3 are statement of fact that are in 22-364, but they don't have any authority in them. Number 2 says local government may create a leash ordinance. I agree with that comment that you can create a leash ordinance. It doesn't have anything to do with 22-364, so that's not in 22-364 in any way. So the authority is that the municipality can create a leash ordinance. None of this sort of flows from authority in my mind. Section 3 is requirements on public property. In bullet 1, you have the comment that the animals must be on a leash and restrained at all times. I'm not sure what restrained means. In state statute, the wording is always under control, right? So if we mean the same thing as the state statute of under control, I'd recommend that you change that wording so that we're sort of in line with that instead of having to define what we mean by restrained. Following on bullets, the next comment is we have the 10-foot retractable leash. I don't know how you enforce whether a retractable leash is out 12 feet or is out 7 feet. My recommendation would be you either allow or disallow retractable leashes. Make the decision, define how long you allow leashes to be, and move on. The next 3 comments, next 3 bullets on there are all actually just from state statute. So they don't add anything to it. You guys aren't adding any new powers or anything. Those are essentially directly quoted from what state statutes already say. Section 4, violations. Bullet 1 says violating the state roaming law is an infraction punishable by a fine of $92, and you quote 22-364. That's correct. That is true. I think what you mean is that a violation of this ordinance it results in a $92 fine. I'm assuming that's what you mean there. That wording's really strange. Item number 2 is probably the scariest part in this whole ordinance if you read it carefully. So this says any person violating the ordinance shall be subject to immediate removal from the area and be subject to denial of future entry into any park and recreation area and school. So that means if you ticket someone for having their dog off leash, they can no longer watch their kid's soccer game. So I'm guessing it's illegal. I hope it's illegal. And I would recommend deleting that. Kick the people out of the park, fine. I don't think you can do anything else in that bullet, and I sure hope you can't. Bullet 3, the mayor shall designate in writing 1 or more town officials, employees, or agents empowered to take enforcement action authorized by this ordinance. All dog control is currently police action. This is done by police or the animal control officer who is a trained, certified agent to do this stuff. This authorized the mayor to deputize me to be the new leash enforcement officer. I shouldn't be allowed to do that. So I highly recommend you restrict that to the animal control officer, who is the person who is trained and certified to do this work. Are you sick of me yet?
No.
Okay, so then I have just a couple of general. I have a couple of general comments that I'll make, and then I'll get out of your way. So the first is, I really recommend that everyone make sure that they read what is actually in 22-364, which is the roaming statute. The roaming statute doesn't just mean a dog that has left your property. A roaming dog is any dog that is not under the control of the owner when you're on property that is not yours. So that means that anytime you're on a neighbor's yard and your dog is not under control, if you're on a public land and your dog's not under your control, then you are subject to an infraction from this. And that is the same $92 fine that's being proposed for the leash ordinance here. So there's been a number of comments that I've heard about how the ACO can't ticket people for violating this statute. A plain reading of the statute says that's untrue. There's nothing on the public record. There's no testimony from the ACO saying that's true. There's no comment from the town attorney saying that's true. I really recommend you make sure that's true, because a plain reading of the statute absolutely says that the ACO has the power to ticket under that statute. So I don't think that's true. It also allows the police to ticket under that statute. So I really recommend that you look up into that. The second comment I want to make is...
I want to
please
on that real quick.
Yep.
I want to get your interpretation correct.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the ACO can't or can?
I think they absolutely can ticket under existing 22-364 anytime you have, if someone's at Nathan Lester and their dog is misbehaving and running around and not under their control, the ACO can absolutely ticket. So can a police officer. So read the statute.
Because when I asked the ACO that very same question,
yeah,
and they said as far as this ordinance was concerned, that same statute would apply for the $92.
I don't think the statute applies. I think it's the same infraction.
The same, yes, it's the same.
Yeah, so if you look
infraction.
up in the infraction table, I believe it's the same
Yes,
infraction.
it is.
Yep.
Yes. We did confirm that.
Yeah, so I think the fine is right for the ordinance, but I think that you can also issue the same $92 ticket without enacting this ordinance.
Not without the leash.
As long as if the dog is judged to be not under the control of the owner,
I'm not
right?
gonna-
And
I'm not
so
gonna
the
get
only
into
thing
it.
that this lets you do is ticket someone who has a dog under control but not on a leash. I'll make one final comment. If you'll permit, if you'd like to let other people go first, I'm happy to return.
Well, just doesn't remember, we still got two more ordinances
Yeah.
to get through.
Yeah, just wrap it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. The last comment I want to make is several of the issues I've heard tonight are problems with a lack of enforcement of the existing laws. The existing laws provide strict penalties for repeat offenses where a dog attacks or bites a person. It's a $1,000 fine. There's the possibility for jail time. And so what we really want to do is make sure that we enforce the statutes that we've already got before we add new ones. And so I apologize for taking too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak under this ordinance? Okay, seeing none. The next ordinance it's not really a new ordinance, it's an amendment to the ordinance regarding waste management and recycling. Would you like to speak to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. This just is moving, let me pull it up.
You want me to do it?
If you have it fresh in
I
your
can
mind,
tell you
it's
fresh
just
in my-
changing.
So the
Yeah.
update to this ordinance is basically because we contract our waste removal, our disposal through SCARA. And they have terminated their contract with the the incinerator in Preston. And so the ordinance is basically updated to say that the trash disposal going to the incinerator will actually be going to the Lisbon incinerator, Wheelabrator. So that's really the gist of what the update to the ordinance is. It also added language in that basically says if the hauler were to bring commercial trash and charge it to the town, that the hauler would be responsible for reimbursement, because we don't pay for commercial disposal.
Very good. And would anybody like to comment on that change? Hearing none, next amendment.
The next amendment specifies that people are not allowed to blow their leaves into the street. It just wasn't in writing. It needed to be in writing.
Talked about not blowing snow into the street, but it never specified leaves. So, and that's probably the biggest problem of them all. So, anybody like to address that ordinance? Okay, hearing none. Any counselors have comments?
Just one.
Yes.
Ma'am, when you were attacked by that dog, did you sign a written complaint?
Oh, yeah, I called animal control. They came out and took a statement, and that happened on someone else's property where I was visiting. Animal control came out to my house after I got home and called them.
Okay, but did you sign a written complaint?
I'm pretty 99% sure I did, because this last time that I got chased by the same dog, I signed another complaint.
Okay, thank you.
And when that dog did bite me, they did go get two dogs, because they have two dogs, and they were quarantined, and the owners had to pay for that quarantine at the time. But because that incident with the biting and then the other 2 incidents of the chasing up the street were too far apart, that they really couldn't do anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, I've lived in this town since 1994, a property owner, dog owner. I've owned several dogs, with a yard, a fenced-in yard, and a not fenced-in yard. I've been personally attacked, walking down the street on Crestview Drive by a Rottweiler who got away from the 10-year-old boy who was walking him. And he bit me. Luckily for me, he bit me in the wallet, so it didn't hurt me that bad. But that dog wound up I called the police, and this was years ago, so I just beg to differ with some of the comments that are made here. I called the police called the ACO, they collected that dog, and they destroyed that dog, which was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me to see that child lose his pet. But there are teeth in the laws here. You just got to call up and call 911 if you get attacked. I've had my dogs attacked where other dogs come into the yard. Luckily for me, my dogs are big and they can fight. But I also had little dogs that couldn't fight and ran away. So I understand what you're all saying, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you want to exercise your dog properly. But this is a serious situation. I had a pit bull come at me. Dog just jumped off the porch, and I was walking my big German Shepherd, and dog jumped off the porch and was coming after her, and she stood her ground, and he decided it wasn't worth the fight. So, but for people that I also have a beagle, okay? He's not going to fight with a pit bull, but he's always on a leash. And dogs should always be on a leash or inside of, a fenced-in area that's secure that they can't jump over. Not a 3-foot fence that a dog can jump over. You probably need a 4 or 6-foot fence. So that's my input. Again, I've been a dog owner for 30 plus years in this town, and I always walk my dog on a leash, a 4-foot leash, not a 10-foot leash, because I know what the dogs are capable of.
Any other council comments? Hearing none, this public hearing is adjourned, and we will resume at 7 o'clock for our regular meeting.
So the dog got off. It was or stake it out. Set some bait.
Cookie.
I'm going to send a picture of the cookies to Bill Soms.
Yeah, you gotta tell Bill what
Oh,
he
yeah,
is.
where's Bill's cookies? He's not here, he forfeits.
Actually, I did have Bill's cookies, but
Do you? They right there?
He
No?
forfeits.
I have them in my office.
We want to take a picture of them and send them to
Send
her.
Bill the cookies, send the
Okay.
picture.
We
Big
ate.
bite taken out of one of them.
John's
Back in the
teeth marks.
package.
I'll send him one of mine, big bite taken out of it.
It was yours.
You lose, Bill. You weren't here, you forfeit your cookie.
It's disconnected.
The silence is dead.
Go with that last couple minutes.
Are you ready when we are off? It's not 7 yet on the official Naval Observatory time, but
I'm ready when you are.
okay. We'll be ready when the Navy is.
burning in that last 30 seconds.
Ready? I'd like to call this Ledyard Town Council meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Here.
Mrs. Ingles?
Here.
Mr. Malone?
Here.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mrs. McGrattan? Here. Mr. Sebelia?
Here.
Mr. Soms? Mr. Washington?
Here.
8 here, 1 absent.
Thank you. For those that have attended the council meetings before, I'm going to go a little off topic here in the beginning. I'm going to ask Mayor Allen to say a few words. I'm going to ask Rabbi Ekstran to say a few words. And then I will open it to residents and property owners. And while you're here, I am strictly going to enforce the 3 minutes. So if you have speeches, you will want to look at them and mark them up before you come up, because I will gavel you. I'm that mean. So, the other thing I'm going to do to the nice housing authority people that are sitting around the room, your agenda item is at the very, quite far down the agenda. I'm going to move you to the very beginning of the agenda because I'm afraid we're going to be here for a very long time and I don't think you want to be. So I will move your portion of the meeting up. Fireman, I think you're going to be here for a while. But you have been before, right?
It's all good.
Okay. Mayor Allen.
So thank you. I've prepared an official statement as a result of an action that occurred within the town recently, so I'm going to read that to you all. On or about February 6, 2020, a political sign on private property appeared on Gallop Hill Road behind Ledyard High School. The sign, hand-painted on a scrap of plywood, read, "Go Trump" on the first line and "Schiff liar" on the second. At that time, a couple residents expressed their dislike of the sign, where I discussed political free speech rights that are afforded to us as American citizens. On Saturday morning, the sign remained, but was now emblazoned with a spray-painted gold swastika in the center of the sign. My office received several calls and emails, as well as social media inquiries and media coverage. The Ledyard Police Department removed the sign and held the same as evidence. An active investigation is ongoing, and charges against the offender can range from breach of peace and vandalism to a Class E felony, which is intimidation based on bigotry or bias. In conducting due diligence, I have found that the so-called tagging of Trump signs with swastikas is not new, dating back at least to an incident reported on December of 2015 in Redding, California. Since then, similar incidents have occurred in California, Arizona, Ohio, Maryland, Florida, Texas, and Georgia, to name a few. Unfortunately, what appears to be a similar ugly incident has now occurred in Ledyard. No other symbol in the world elicits a more negative emotion and fear than the swastika. There is no place for it in town, and no place for its use, political or otherwise. Political discourse is a function that allows us, as enlightened citizens, to hear and be heard in a positive way, with the goal of achieving an equally positive outcome. What occurred here today was not political discourse. I denounce the use of such vile, repugnant symbols anywhere in society today. Additionally, I remind everyone to respect the property rights of others, as well as their political opinions, even when those opinions do not align with those of your own. At the end of the day, we must remember we are all neighbors, friends, and residents of our wonderful community, and we cannot let a small few detract from the many. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Rabbi? Oh, Rabbi, I'm not going to hold you to 3 minutes.
Oh, thank God. I will try to. I will try anyway. Mr. Mayor,
thank you for being here.
Ms. Davis and council members, residents. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. And as I said, I'm Rabbi Mark Ekstrand. I'm from Temple Emmanuel in Waterford. I'm a resident of New London.
Some of you may remember me because I was very honored to be invited to give the invocation at this past year's Memorial Day Parade, and I'm equally honored to be here this evening. Although I'm not a resident of Ledyard, I'm concerned about happenings in your town. Many of my congregants are your friends and neighbors. I was contacted by some who had become alarmed because of the recent incident of the swastika painted on the sign on Gallop Hill Road. I do not know the intent of the person who painted the swastika. However, I do know very well the effect that this symbol has, and likely the painter of the symbol knows as well. The swastika is meant to intimidate. For Jews and others, it is a symbol of deep hatred. For us, seeing the swastika immediately calls to mind 6 million Jews and millions of others murdered systematically by the Nazis. Unfortunately, the kind of hatred that undergirded the Holocaust did not die at the end of World War II. It survives. We can see it in anti-Semitic attacks all over Europe. We also see it in anti-Semitic attacks in the United States. Anti-Semitism is arguably the oldest form of hatred known to humanity. It has survived so long because it lies quietly beneath the surface, bubbling up here and there until conditions are right. And now, in the United States, it is bubbling up more frequently. Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and author, was asked during one of his presentations at Connecticut College years ago, could the Holocaust happen again? We would all like to think, not here, not in the greatest country in the world, this bastion of democracy. We'd all like for Elie Wiesel to have said no to this question. But that's not what he said. He said, if conditions are right, it could happen again. Anti-Semitism lurks, waiting for political turmoil and economic hardship. So how do we combat it? We combat it by rooting it out everywhere we see it and hear of it. We condemn it and give it no sanctuary. A swastika anywhere should be unconditionally and unequivocally denounced. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your remarks. I think you already know that this type of denunciation is necessary. Most, if not all of you, will be willing to make such a statement yourself if you've not already done so. But that's not enough. You see, anti-Semitism is learned, and it also learns. It is learned and passed from one person to another, one generation to another. But anti-Semitism itself, it also learns. It responds to conditions. Centuries ago, Jew-hating was purely religious. Then it was economic. Then it was nationalism. Then the Nazis tried to make it scientific. It morphs to fit whatever conditions exist. Just calling anti-Semitism out is not enough. We must educate it out of existence along with all other kinds of hate, whether they be based upon race, religion, ethnicity, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, or any other human quality. Hate will have no safe harbor in our communities only if we educate ourselves and our children. It's quite a coincidence that tonight, Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, is speaking at this very moment at the Coast Guard Academy right across the Thames River. Mr. Kendi asserts, rightly, I believe, that when it comes to hate, there can be no neutral ground. If we are not doing something to actively combat hate and promote love, we are allowing anti-Semitism and other forms of hate to lie below the surface. So what can we do? We can invite Holocaust survivors or their children to come speak to your civic groups. Invite speakers about the African American and Hispanic experience in America to come and do the same. Speak to and educate your children. The mandated curriculums in Connecticut on the Holocaust and genocide and the African American studies, they're good, but they're not enough. Children learn social norms primarily from their parents. They learn it primarily in the home. And unless we are willing to actively create a community that rejects hatred in all of its forms, we will never have it. I'm not putting this on your shoulders alone. I'm here to help, and I know that the Jewish Federation of Eastern Connecticut is also here to help. We stand by you, and we are ready to support you. I want to lastly thank you for your time. If you have questions for me later after this meeting, call me. I'm always here for you. I understand that this discussion alone shows your concern for your Jewish friends and neighbors. And I do hope that this council finds it necessary itself to respond to this incident by expressing in unequivocal and unqualified terms that hate in any of its forms has no place in our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I will open it up to resident and property owners for 3-minute or less comments. Yes.
First, I'd like to thank Mayor Fred for putting out his statement. I do appreciate it. I have a prepared statement that was written prior to any statement being made. Members of the Town Council, my name is Andrea Goodrich, and I have proudly lived in Ledyard for the better part of 20 years. Let me first say, while I'm a supporter of our bipartisan leadership, I am disturbed in 2020 that I am here discussing this issue. I was away for business over the last week, and when I had a free minute to read the local news, I was shocked to see that in our town there was a homemade sign with the words "Go Trump, Shift Liar" with a swastika painted on it, posted near my children's school. While I hope all parties could engage in respectful politics, I understand that radicals will make signs with messages such as "Shift Liar" or a negative Trump message, but the swastika is unacceptable, and the use of it needs to be condemned publicly and swiftly. I went in search of a statement from our town leadership condemning that hate speech, and or a statement from the mayor who received my vote, and was shocked not to find one. I did find this statement. When you get into the political season, you will have some sign disruption and whatnot, but there are no hate groups that we are aware of. Make no mistake about this statement is false. There are hate groups quietly lurking in every community in America, waiting for their community to allow their message to be heard. Our students and our tax-paying citizens need to know that our leadership is not going to tolerate hate speech and will protect our Jewish community as well. When we as a community become apathetic to incidents like this and dismiss them as an anomaly, it encourages others to engage in such behavior, and that is unacceptable. We need to be a united front against all anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, and xenophobia in our community. Martine Niemöller's message lives on in us. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. In the climate that we live in, we cannot afford to have your silence on this issue to breed acceptance. I urge you to put out a statement condemning all hate speech, and I thank you for doing so, and to embrace our diversity and prevent any attempt to divide us. You've been elected to speak for all of us, and I ask you to take that responsibility seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Yes. Yes. Name and address.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Phoebe Herndon. I'm a resident of Ledyard, Connecticut for 33 years now, and I retired for 33 years for the state of Connecticut.
And for the record, your address, please.
16 Bittersweet Drive, Galesbury, Connecticut. I raised my beautiful kids here. One is a major in the Air Force, and one is an Army Ranger. And we always love this small town. I could leave, but no, because I love the environment here. I love the people. They're all nice. And I am so happy that this thing is being addressed. I got no choices to do today. I could go to, Coast Guard to attend the anti-racism, but I choose to be here because I love this town and I would like to address this nonsense craziness, and I'm glad that we're here. And thank you, Mayor, for addressing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Marty Wood. I live at 11 South Glenwoods Road. I'm also the chair of the Ledyard Democratic Town Committee. I'm reaching out to all the members of Ledyard Gales Ferry, and particularly our elected officials, to publicly condemn the use of symbols that instill fear in our community. So thanks, Fred, for doing that. This condemnation needs to be more than bipartisan. It needs to be nonpartisan condemnation. There are more than 2 political parties in Ledyard and Gales Ferry. In fact, there are 300 members of our community that are members of minor parties. There's almost 4,500 unaffiliated. So if we look at those numbers, there's more than 2 parties. Most recently, a swastika was sprayed on a homeowner's sign. This symbol is anti-Semitic and is used to instill fear in not only members of the Jewish faith, but immigrants, gays, lesbians, underrepresented and marginalized groups. How alarming. Just before the 2018 election, tiki torches, like the ones used by racists and white nationalists on August 20th in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, were used to support a Trump banner at the intersection of Colonel Ledyard Highway and Route 117. Last summer, a rope noose was found hanging from a tree in Highland Lake Park here in Ledyard. This symbol brings to mind the lynchings by the KKK. We must publicly and immediately denounce these acts before the next incident occurs. Hate speech often escalates to harassment, harassment to threats, and threats to physical violence. We are better than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second comment? Yes.
Hello to members of the Town Council, to Mayor Fred, and everyone in attendance. My name is Luke Cloutier of 136 Lambtown Road. I was born of a Cuban man whose father was a first-generation Cuban immigrant. For the first years of my life, I lived with my mother, my grandmother, and my grandmother's husband, who I refer to as my Papa. Papa was an African-American man. As a child, Papa would tell me stories about how his grandmother was a slave, and how his mother was the first generation in his family to be born free of the chains of slavery. He would tell me about his own experiences as a young man, entering adulthood in the time of segregation. He always talked about the progress we had made as a nation and his hope for continued progress in my lifetime. In 2017, my parents made the decision to grow our family and adopt a child. The child, who is now my brother, is a beautiful boy of Black and Hispanic heritage. He has brought more joy than I can express to my family. However, to be honest, I fear we made a mistake by bringing a boy of color to Ledyard. I feel that Ledyard has a racism problem. My family recently made an effort to bring this up to one of our town officials. When we expressed our concerns, The town officials' response was that we were too sensitive. There was no problem. Since our feelings were not taken seriously, I will state facts. In the summer of 2019, a noose was hung in Ledyard, in a Ledyard public park, a clear symbol of racism that I would define as a threat. Members of the town leadership and the town police force did not investigate the incident nearly thoroughly enough. Town officials determined the noose was not race-related and denied help from the NAACP in investigating the issue. Now, this past weekend, a swastika was painted in town near the high school, another clear sign of hate. This means there have now been 2 public displays of white supremacy, and to my knowledge, no action has been taken. I want to be clear in saying that it is not politically extreme for me to say swastikas and nooses are not acceptable in our town or anywhere. Action should be taken, and those responsible must be held accountable. I'm here tonight to ask 2 questions. First, will this council and the leadership of this town acknowledge that we have a problem with racism? And if so, what will the leadership of Ledyard do to address it? Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Siegel-Miles. I live at 712 Colonel Ledyard Highway. I would like to express my great concern over the painting of a swastika on a sign in our town. This is not the first time that we have seen racist or anti-Semitic symbols in Ledyard. As mentioned before, there were the tiki torches and the noose hung in Highland Lake Park. And as you may remember, tiki torches are significant because they were used by the marchers in Charlottesville who chanted, "Jews will not replace us." That is a very powerful symbol. It doesn't matter who put up the swastika or what motivated them to do so, our response must be the same. This is a nonpartisan issue. We must all stand united and all condemn this symbol of violence, hatred, and bigotry. With the presidential election upon us this year, I am very concerned about the potential for more of these types of incidents, or worse, to impact us here in Ledyard. Imagine the impact if we are all united in standing against hate speech and expressions of hate in our community. A strong public statement of condemnation of this instance of hate speech from our town council, from all of the residents, and a lot of community leaders, thank you, Mayor, will show people who would make such hate speech or other acts of hate that this will not be tolerated in our town. And even perhaps more importantly, it will show people who may be victims of hate that their community will stand with them against those who would make them feel unwelcome or unsafe. We must stand in solidarity together. I ask that the town council make a very strong public statement of condemnation of the use of the swastika and any hate speech in our town. Thank you.
Next. Anyone else? No one else. Okay. Are there, next up would be Tri-Town Trail. Committee, you're prepared to make a report? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Parkinson. I'm president of the Tri-Town Trail. I brought with me tonight my husband Keith, who's a member of the Tri-Town Trail, and Scott Johnson, who's Parks and Rec, who's going to be one of our friends. The Tri-Town Trail, as you know, we've been actively working, and we perceive ourselves as advocates and catalysts in the development of the Tri-Town Trail, which is from Bluff Point to Preston Park, for people who don't know that are here. And we also see ourselves as a fundraiser to make this trail happen. The reason for tonight's presentation is to give you an update of where we are right now and what we're doing going forward in 2020, and to ask permission that we can get started on the construction of the trail. We also were asking for Parks and Rec Department to perhaps take us under their tutelage, and so we can have a home within a Ledyard department. But Scott, I think we'll be talking about forming the collaborative, or not? we really, really hope that within the Parks and Rec Department, we can form a trail collaborative and inviting all members, agencies, groups that are involved in trail building in the town of Ledyard so we can share our knowledge, our efforts, our fundraising, our concerns so that everybody isn't doing something the same way. We can share our knowledge. So we're hoping that will happen. We gave you a small handout, not so small maybe, to express what we're doing in 2020. We call this Joe Clark Brook Bridge Project 2020. We've recently applied to the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut for a grant to help us with this project. None of the grants have been awarded yet, so we're anxiously waiting for that. The Tri-Town Trail has some fundraising money. We've raised money in the last 10 years, and we haven't been able to spend it because we haven't been able to go forward. We also plan between our grant money, if we receive it, and grant money that we're going to go after. We'll have a couple fundraisers this year. We expect to use 2,000 volunteer hours this year, which will be another dollar amount estimated about $30,000. So we intend to invest a good $60,000 into the Tri-Town Trail Phase 1. On the second page of the handout I gave you, there's a copy of our one page out of one of our brochures, and in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a little map called Phase 1. If you go from the parking sign up in the upper right-hand corner, that's the Preston Town Park. And as you proceed to the left, you'll see a little black dot there before it goes straight down. That's where we want to build the bridge. Approximately, that's where this Joe Clark Bridge North will be built. My husband will explain some more about the bridge. Then if you see as the line drops down, that goes across the Ross property where we've got an easement, and then it goes through the Bauman property where we have an easement. Took us 2+ years to get those easements in place, and that's why we've had a major delay in going forward. Then it drops down farther, and then it makes a turn and goes back to 117 for the parking lot to be made there by that metal building on 117. That whole length is about 1.2 to 1.4 miles. Last fall, after we got the easements, we started making plans to flag the trail. This is not even a deer path up there, so this is right through the raw woods. But we did go through it and flagged it with tape. The last fall, we had a bunch of town officials, mayor included, and Scott, with Chad Frost, hiked through it. So that's been done, and we got good response about how beautiful it is back in there. So we hope to continue that. But this year we want to build the Joe Clark Bridge North Bridge, the bridge and then up along the Bauman and Ross properties, there's many places up there where we call them riverlets, where major gullies, where it's wetlands up there. It's dry, it's vertical wetlands. So we have to build little footbridges across like at least 7 or 8 of those. So we figured that into our 2020 project as well. And if we can accomplish all that and widen the trail, clear the trail to 2 to 4 feet this year, we'll be doing good. Going forward in 2021, we want to continue the planning for a Joe Clark Brook Bridge South, which is another bridge, major bridge we'll have to build. And then we'll start making plans for the rest of the trail that goes from where this little bit at the bottom goes all the way to 214. That's phase 2 of the northern end. Groton itself is also working on grants and building the trail from Bluff Point up to the Marriott Hotel. So that's in plans at Groton. So we're building both ends of the trail. We'll worry about the middle section when we get through with both of the other ends. We'll worry about going through the Groton utilities at another date. So we have alternatives, plans if that doesn't work out. So we're working diligently on both ends. Keith?
Keith Parkinson, 55 Rose Hill Road, Ledyard. Here there are people telling about how long they've lived in town. I know Mary's been around for a couple of years. Former neighbors, I think it's up to the 50-year point now. Yep, no, I got it. On the front of the handout I gave you is a copy of the bridge that we're going to be building at the north end. This is an example of it. It looks rustic, and that's on purpose. We've chosen a Forest Service plan that instead of modern steel bridge, we're going to use tree stringers, rough cut wood, both for the planks and for the running boards. It's a heavy duty unit. It will be a 10-foot wide bridge to accommodate emergency vehicles that are needed, and also to get equipment up, as Karen was mentioning, on those vertical wetlands and the trail. There's glacial moraine still in there that we have to build around, and it's quite a project, but it's a lot of fun. It's going to be a beautiful asset for the town of Ledyard. Yep. We are going to minimize, first, all the literature we've been reading says do it right the first time. That is so that it will cut the maintenance costs and it will be around for 100 years from now. And so that's what we're going with. You'll notice that we have replicas of geocells. This is a geotextile map that is water permeable, water can flow through it, and inside of it is a geocell, which is a hexagonal plastic device that we fill with stone or dirt that's there, and so that will sit right on top of the ground. We won't be excavating into the ground with this. There are other alternatives that could be done, but that's expensive and it would be disturbing the area. This bridge will stay in the woods and look like a part of the woods.
45 feet long.
Yeah, 45 foot long. The hardest thing we're working with are the 3 stringers here. It's actually going to be 5 stringers. They're 45 foot long, 25 inches at the base, 21 inches in diameter at the top. So we're looking for that kind of wood that might be available. We've talked to the tree warden for Ledyard, and the response was pro, because he was one of the officials that walked on the trail last fall. It looks like it's going to be difficult finding trees of that size that we can have them cut down. Be they need to be down or...
We're still looking though.
That's right. It'll probably be utility poles, I'm of the opinion now, out of Georgia, southern yellow pine. That meets the specs of the Forest Service on the strength. This bridge is a consumable bridge.
Sacrificial.
Sacrificial, consumable. If there's a 1,000-year flood, the bridge will go downstream. We'll have to disassemble it, bring it back, and redo it again. The alternative to that is to build a permanent bridge. Steel bridge is what the plans call for. Detracts from the aesthetics of what we're trying to do. we would have to comply with the Army Corps of Engineers if we chose to go that route. And that's too hard and too expensive.
This will be built with some contract labor, contracts to get these things in, but most of the rest of the stuff will be by volunteers doing it.
We'll need contractors for handling 45-foot poles.
I think so.
That professional. Talked with the tree warden, he's given big toothpicks. Gave us a local tree service that would be, that the town has used that could be of real value to us. The plans that we're following are U.S. Department of Agricultural trail plans.
Forestry Service. The Forestry Service.
Forestry Service, yes. It's, that's where we are. If you have any questions?
It's gonna happen. We're gonna get there. We're gonna make it happen.
Good.
Good for you.
Good. I know you guys have been working on it for a long
years.
We gotta get younger volunteers, all of us.
What type of equipment do you plan on driving across the bridge?
I'm sorry.
What type of equipment do you plan on driving across the bridge?
Probably a gator or something small. If we required to have an emergency, needed to evacuate someone or something of that type, you could get a small vehicle. That's why it's going to be a 10-foot
So
wide.
under 5,000 pounds?
Oh, yeah, probably. It's not big. The strength on the bridge is specified in the plans. They're 8,000-pound support timbers that we're putting in there. So we could take and have 5,000 or that's more than enough for what we need to do.
We'll have a fundraiser this spring, and we'll hope you'll all attend, and we'll give you a walk back to Joe Clark Brook. Everybody says it's wonderful.
Show it to the attendants.
When we get it going, we want you all to come.
There you go.
Thank you. And
Thank
we,
you.
as always, really commend your committee.
Yes.
You guys do good work.
Have one other request from Mr. We are going to be building this on town property. We will have to submit a building permit. We would like permission to build on town property. With the easements, we have permission for the smaller bridges across the easement properties, but we officially should have something from the town.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of the tree warden, AKA Public Works Director, he was going to speak tonight and give a presentation, and I suggested that we would postpone him to another meeting because we knew this meeting would perhaps go long. And Steve is very passionate about his roads, so he can speak at length. So at this time, we have comments of town councilors, and I usually go last, but I am going to go first with your permission. I have a bit of a prepared statement, but not really. It goes without saying that what happened in our town is unacceptable. The mayor's comments certainly speak for the town council, and we also, I believe I can say for the town council, strongly denounce this activity. But I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, as those of you who know me know I often do. I drove by the sign and location at least 5 times and never saw it, until the day posted a photo provided by Representative Conley. It was really unfortunate that sharing the photo on Facebook was then used in the newspaper and only gave publicity to someone clearly seeking it. How exactly was that helpful to our community? I really love Ledyard. I've been here 50 years too, Keith, almost 50 years. So I'm really angry, and maybe angry is a hard word, but I'm upset that another one of our state officials thought it necessary to immediately contact Channel 3 News. How exactly was that helpful to our community in this situation? I thought about the best way to move forward and have a real meaningful discussion. Unfortunately, the town legislative body had no opportunity to have a dialogue before the discussion took place on Facebook and in the newspaper. So instead of being deliberate, we find ourselves here tonight expecting to respond, as we must do, and prepare a statement. I think we must do that. I agree with all of your comments. But I'm not going to ask you necessarily to make a comment unless you feel you want to. Until we have that opportunity to discuss, because I know we can work together, but we don't need politicians to get involved. We will do it as neighbors, invite the rabbi if we decide we would like to do that, but let's do that without politicians and move forward as neighbors. Any other comments from town councilors?
Well, first. I've only lived in Ledyard since 1976. Okay, so I went to Ledyard Middle School, I went to Ledyard High School. I got 2 kids in the school. Okay, unfortunately, as people may not like to hear this, but Ledyard's like a lot of other towns. You're gonna have 99. It's like when you look at a bushel of apples. You've got a bunch of great apples in there and a couple bad ones. And the goal of the town is always, and I'll speak for myself, and I think I can speak for those on the commission, on the council. You try and root out the bad apples, okay? By seeing somebody, and I'm the type of guy who likes to sit back, I watch, I deliberate, I find, I'll use the word, I find my person I'm looking for, and I attack. I don't open the door, I don't let them know I'm coming. That's how I get people, okay? And I can safely say that I've got a lot of history, okay, relative to my own personal life. So being quiet on a topic does not say that a person condones it, because you have no idea what people are doing in the background, okay? And as far as how you get a problem, because people said, you know, the rabbi was right on the point. These issues start at the home, okay? And you want to fix it, you got to fix it at the home. But the part of that is you got to listen to your neighbors. You got to listen closely to your neighbors. You got to listen to what people say and what people mean. Okay, there's what people say, there's what people mean. And that's how you root this stuff out, okay? I have no interest in, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I have no interest in sitting around the table and doing kumbaya. I like to get results. I like to figure out how do we root something out. I don't have a problem sitting down with a group of people and say, okay, we need to attack it. How's the best way to ferret this out? Because you need to ferret out the problem, okay? Because that's only going to solve the problem. And if we think we're going to be able to kill it, this has got, as the rabbi was very good about saying, these tentacles run deep, okay? And what you're dealing with, you have people who may be feel like they don't have anything at stake. They may feel like they're not part of the community. And the best we can hope and do is try and bring them into the fold of the community. But first, you got to figure out who they are, because they do this stuff in the dark, and our job is to get them out into the light. Okay, and unless we can do that, then we're never going to fix this problem. And this is a long-term problem. This problem is not going to get solved this year. It ain't going to get solved before I probably die. I'll be blunt, because every time you turn around, there's somebody else who's got an issue, and they want to point the finger at somebody and blame somebody who had nothing to do with their issue. Okay, but as a community, what we can do is listen to what our kids say, listen to what our kids watch, and pay attention to that stuff, because that's what helps condone it. If you go up to the high school, you listen. I've sat in stores in town, I sat in stores in Groton, I sat in stores in New London, the surrounding towns, not to point anybody out, but if you listen to what the kids say, and the parents that don't say anything about it, that's part of our problem. Okay, people have to hold people accountable, and the best way to do that is first figure out where they are, and I'm not going to say hunt them down, but you got to find them. Okay, so until we can figure out who these people are, and they may not even be from this community. Okay, and that people may not like the idea of that, but somebody goes to another community. I remember, and I love my mom. She passed away many years ago, but she once told me we lived in a community, not this one, where the crooks lived in town and they went out of town to steal. Okay, and my point being this: you don't know who did this. Okay, there's issues in town. There's issues in every town, because there's always going to be pockets. Okay, but what we can do is try and listen, pay attention, and then call it out. Okay, I don't have any problem calling somebody out that I think has done something. I'll call them out first. It's great if I can prove somebody. Would have been great if we could find somebody walking around with the gold paint on their hands. Okay, so we can figure out who it was, because I think we all want that. But the reality is, people are gonna hide in the darkness, okay, and we gotta flush them out of the light. And part of that process is everybody sitting in this room who lives in the town, everybody who's gonna watch this video is gonna listen to what people are saying and figure out what side of this issue they are on. Free speech is a great thing, but you don't need the hate speech. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, no, I just like to agree with Mike. I agreed. Thank you, Mayor, for your comment. Rabbi, well-spoken. Agreed with everything you said. I had the fortunate, when I growing up, is the neighbor behind my parents. They were both survivors of Auschwitz. So I learned from them what evil really was. Unfortunately, I have to say, I drove by that sign every day. I didn't even see it. Saturday morning, as was reported in the papers, when it happened, I drove by that sign that morning. I didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it.
Right.
I don't think anybody's been looking for it. It was spotted. Thank God it was spotted. And it is being rooted out. And we're discussing it. It's out in the open. Yes, acknowledging we have a problem is the first issue. To your point, sir. Okay? Yes, there are people in the world who are biased. There are people in this world who are hatred. We're never going to get rid of them all. The ideal way is to get rid of them all. But we're not going to, because people have their own personal beliefs and opinions that are not necessarily aligned with all of us in this room right now. We all condone this, as Linda was saying, as the mayor has said, as the rabbi has said. As a community, we've come forward. Everybody in this room is here because of this incident. I think that shows that we stand as a community to condone this abhorrent behavior.
So true.
Any other comments?
I would just add that, you know,
No, not from the public. I'm sorry.
everything, I agree with everything everybody said here, and the rabbi and the mayor, but I sure hope that we are allocating the adequate resources to actually find these people and bring them to justice for whatever it's worth. If nothing else, just on principle that we're not ignoring it. We are doing something about it.
One more.
Thank you. Yes.
I hope you'll all stick around because I think one thing that bothers me about this is creating the false notion that this is the stuff of Ledyard. In other words, what I mean is that this is what Ledyard is. That this is our dominant trait, right? So I hope you'll stick around because later on tonight's agenda, we're renewing a lease with the Ledyard Congregational Church, which is hosting the town's food pantry, which is serving more households than ever and has a bigger volunteer base than ever. And I would propose to you that that is what Ledyard is about.
Thank you. Any other comments here? Oh, yes.
Somebody said, you know, if you hear something, say something. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Because you hear kids or people talking and you kind of shrug it off. But maybe we should pay more attention to what is being said.
Thank you. Yes.
One of the, for lack of a better word, one of the positives that I see coming out of this is the conversation is started. I've had conversations with people about this that I would never, it wouldn't be a subject that we brought up. So maybe that's me being naive. But again, where you say you got to root it out, you have to find it. It's amazing when you start conversations what you find out.
Yep. That's it.
Any counselors have any comments on any other issues? Yes.
I have the perfect audience here.
Run while you can.
No, I just wanted to talk about the census.
Yes.
Around March 12th, everybody will be getting a letter from the Census Bureau. And we're asking you to please fill it out, email it back, or call. Otherwise, people will be coming out kind of after you. But this means money for ledges. We need to count every single person. And it also, what was I going to say here? It also affects our representation in Congress. 10 years ago, we lost a representative because our population went down, or maybe it didn't really go down, but people did not fill out the form. The other thing is, if anybody is looking for a temporary job, the Census Bureau is looking for people. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire on email, or this next Wednesday, the 19th, at the Bill Library, there'll be an informational session from 2:30 to 3:30 on the census. And from 3:30 to 6:30, there will be somebody there, again from the Census Bureau, to help you fill out an application if you're interested in a job. And the best part is, I was very surprised, the salary is $23 an hour. That's pretty good for a temporary job.
I want to jump on the back of that. And, for full disclosure, for those who may not know, I'm an engineer for the state of Connecticut, licensed professional civil engineer. And as you can guess, since I work for the state of Connecticut and I work in the transportation part of the state of Connecticut, I won't talk about tolls, but this does play into it. When you don't do the census and they figure out how much money is coming to the state, we get impacted. Okay, so that's why it's so important. Because the better your numbers are, the more money the feds will give us. So if you know your neighbor says, I really don't want to do it, think of this. Your neighbor's saying he doesn't want to do it, he wants you to pay more in taxes. Because either it's going to come out of your pocket that you're going to give to the town, the state, or the feds, or the feds are going to send some of that money back. Because other states are going to do their due diligence, work really hard, get their numbers high. When they look at the population across the U.S., that's how the money falls out. I know, I deal with it in transportation, so when we have great numbers, we'll see great money to help fix our roads. And that's why I'm a big proponent of telling people, fill out this census, because it brings money back to the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. At this time, I am going to call for about a 5-minute recess. In case some of you would like to leave, you're certainly welcome to stay, but we will take a 5-minute recess. Yes.
You had an important thing to get to, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'll get you.
on finance except for that.
Okay.
Thank you. So we will resume, but with the council's nod of the head, I am going to move item number 9 now, so we can send these fine people on their way. We will have the motion first, and then they can come up and discuss. Who would like to make the motion?
Is it under finance? Leave it as.
Wait. I think mine's are numbered differently than your hard copy. Because my number 9 is communications. Wait a minute. Oh, motion.
Roman
under
numeral
motions,
number 9?
Sorry.
No, 9 is the small,
That's it.
the grant.
Yes, that's it, number 9.
Public hearing date?
Yes.
You just did that at the United.
Oh, okay. I see.
Like finance.
All right. Oh my
Finance,
gosh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I make a motion to set a public hearing date on Wednesday, March 11th, 2020 at 6:45 PM to be held in the council chambers, 741 Colonel Ledyard Highway, to review and discuss its proposed 2020 application in the amount of up to $1.5 million to the State Department of DOH for funds under the CDBG Small Cities Program for improvements to Kings Corner Manor Senior Housing Facility, 60 Kings Highway, Gales Ferry.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded, and if you ladies would come up and just a brief overview of what the grant is all about.
Absolutely. Good evening, councilors, mayor. I'm Liz Burdick, I'm the town planner. And we became aware that this grant is becoming, and actually Mary McGrattan made me aware of this about 1.5 years ago, the background on the Ledyard Housing Authority and the condition of the structures. When we were looking at writing this grant for this next period, we found that most of the grants that were given out last year were not for housing rehab, which is what we had written our last grant for private housing rehab, for public housing. So, between Mary and the mayor and I talking and meeting Colleen, our the new director of the housing authority, we said, you know what, how about senior housing? You know, let's see if we can get something going. And luckily, Colleen was on board, and she already had a consultant working with them to put together a needs list. So we have obtained a consultant to help us write the application. The grantee will be the town of Ledyard, and the subrecipient of the money from the state, which is also from HUD, so HUD to the state, to the town, to the Ledyard Housing Authority. And the consultant will help us write the application. He will also administer the grant, make sure all of the work is done in a timely manner, all the reports are done and whatnot. The grant is going to be written, we hope, up to $1.5 million. That's what we are eligible to write up to. There is no town match. So that's the most important part.
Colleen, did you want to say a few things about what wonderful things this grant is going to do for us? Or for you?
It will definitely bring a lot of help to the seniors that are down there. We have 30 units. They average 420 to about 605 square feet. They're all electric baseboard. Windows have only been replaced if they've been broken, and their electric bills can go up to about $200 a month for that small little space. So new windows, new doors, mini splits for a better heat efficiency would be wonderful for these people.
Charlie, would you like to add anything? Charlie's the chairman of the commission, of the authority.
Just that in addition to what Colleen said, we're also thinking of upgrading bathrooms, getting rid of bathtubs. Most of the people that live down there, bathtubs are dangerous, if not deadly. So we're going to walk-in showers and roll-in showers for the wheelchairs. Based on our conversations with the consultant, apparently the people that give this money, that it's for helping the people in the units. They don't want to see pavements and they don't want to see yard work, in other words. And so we're focused on using every single dime into those units to make those people living conditions much better. That's the goal. And since I got involved and Colleen's got involved, we got a great maintenance personnel. There's been a big turnaround down in senior housing down there, and I'm glad to say it's for the better. And with Linda's help, 4 truckloads of food the other day. We're getting significant donations from the commissary on the subbase of food that normally would be thrown out. And so we take a very little bit at housing for those people, and the rest goes up here at the pantry. And I'd like to see that continue.
It's a nice collaboration between the pantry and housing and the senior center. We all share, and it's just been really wonderful. You guys have been just absolutely fabulous. Yes, questions here.
Quick question. Having lived here since 76, actually 74, gosh, I'm getting that old. When was the last time they did anything really to the facilities, as far as the interior where the people live in them? When was it, what was it, last 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 40 years ago?
The only significant improvements were roofing and some.
Nothing interior, though.
No,
Oh,
it's all exterior work. They've replaced water heaters.
1986,
Yeah.
the interior?
Water heaters, stoves, refrigerators, when they break. You know,
Cabinets are...
kitchen cabinets are original.
Countertops original from like
Original.
the...
And
Wow.
place gets
Okay.
painted. We spent 2 months cleaning one thing. We recently passed a new rule that you're not allowed to smoke in any of those units. Okay, we had a person that moved out in one unit, took us 2 months,
Get rid of the
2
smoke,
months
get rid of
to
it.
clean that unit up, to get it where when you walked in, you didn't smell smoke. So,
Can I add one other thing? Because I have a condo that I rent out, and one of the things I learned from an electrician was on the baseboard heaters, check the, because you talked about split hit duct units. So if you're going to use a baseboard heater, think about an oil-filled one. Have whoever's going to be looking at that portion of it, instead of, it's a little bit more expensive, but from everything I've learned and been taught is that the heating costs are much lower because you're heating the oil versus a piece of copper, just a straight piece of wire the whole time.
I have a question. With this grant, are there any stipulations to make these units ADA compliant?
That would be the bathrooms.
I can speak to that. There is not. The money can be used for accessibility, but it's not just for ADA compliance.
I only ask because I know there's some issues as far as accessing the units
Well,
for some people.
exactly.
And I know that's outside the walls, but
We had hoped that we could replace some of the sidewalks because they're in bad shape. But, you know, we can start looking for some other monies for that as
Okay.
well. But apparently they're not big on site work, site improvements.
Yeah.
They want to do everything to make them accessible and energy efficient.
Kevin?
My only comment is, you're talking about putting ductless units, would that be in place of the baseboard heats?
Yeah, they would
So
leave.
the electric baseboard heat would
go out.
go away?
No, they would actually leave them there just as a backup. God forbid they needed it, but then they would put in.
The primary source would be the ductless units, okay.
I assume that'll be, like...
They're way
Chili's
more
would
efficient
assume.
than...
Yeah, way more efficient. Right now, they have a hole in their living room where an air conditioner can be put in.
Yep.
Some people do, some people don't. Some people have a window unit in a wall-through space, so very inefficient.
Will they, sorry to interrupt, but will they fit out every unit?
Yes.
Since elderly housing, with AC, so if you do a split unit, it would be air and...
Yep, we're gonna do both,
Okay.
so it would be the air
Okay.
and the heat, and then they would close up those holes.
Oh, good luck with the grant.
I just bought one in my house, so I think they're one of...
John, and then Tom.
Will you do this as one big project or break it up into individual?
we want to do it with the least amount of impact to the residents. We don't expect people to move, to leave their units, so we just can't go in there and just have everybody leave and do the whole place. So it'll be done on a unit-by-unit basis.
As they empty out?
Pardon?
As they empty out, or you just?
Oh, no, we're gonna.
Oh, just one at a time?
So far, we've been told that all the work we want to do can be done with people in the units. They may lose the bathroom for one day, or something like that, but they will not have to move out of a unit. Our turnover, frankly, down there in those 30 units is very low. If we did it on a turnover basis, people knew it would take us 20 years.
I just want to say also, the grant period is from 2020 to 23. I believe there is an extension, but That's why I appreciate you all setting the public hearing for March 11. It's a very time-sensitive grant. This is DOH. This has to be done, everything has to be done perfectly and within a time period, and the grant application is due, I think, the first week in April. So we don't have a lot of time, and we can't apply for the grant until you pass the resolution.
Yes, Tom.
So, we had a finance committee meeting tonight.
We did.
And that's where I got this on the agenda. And I did we were short on time, so I didn't ask a couple of questions I wanted to ask. And one of them is, so basically, if you got the total amount, right, there's no guarantee you'll get the total amount. You can ask for the up to 1 point. So let's say you got it. That means that now what's the square footage on each unit? Are they about all the same?
No, the lowest is a little over 400, and the double unit, the handicap unit, I guess, is around 600.
Yes, we have 22 that are 420, they're considered singles. We have 3 that are handicapped, those are about 608, and then 5 doubles, which are 520.
So would you do the improvements based on square footage with regard, let's say if something was 420, would that unit be allotted less money than the 520 to be rehabbed? Essentially, interior. I'm just asking for philosophy.
It would be based on, I think we're kind of going for the heating systems, the doors, the windows, the showers, and then kind of go from there. We did have an architect come in and said we think we could do kitchens also. I don't know if that's really truly feasible.
Yeah, I mean, if you just the simple math, it's 50 G's a unit. If you got the G's, yeah, right. That's not. I mean, when you're talking about bathrooms, kitchens, that price kind of. So I just
at
want
the
to.
March 11th hearing, our consultant will be here, and the application will be much further along, so we can have a better sense of exactly what work is done, because that work has to be in the grant.
Okay, so you have to propose a plan.
It's DOH and HUD standards, so you have Davis-Bacon wages, minority-based businesses, women-based businesses. It's very strict in their requirements, but on March 11th, our consultant will be here. His name is Kent Lewis from the Home Development Team, and actually he has experience already with the Housing Authority because CHAFA is paying them to help them with the needs assessment. So that's one of the reasons we chose them, was because they already had the experience with the Housing Authority, and so they could just take it and run with it.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor. Okay.
Only to set the public hearing.
Yeah, we're only setting the public hearing, but we kind of, since this was sort of new, wanted to have the background. Okay, so we're ready to vote. Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Yep. Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to go back, because I skipped it, committee, commission, and board reports. Nate, thank you for your patience.
Linda, minutes? Approve minutes?
No, I have to go back to committee, commission, and board reports. I skipped
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So again, thanks Nate Woody, 770 Long Cove Road, Chair of Ledyard Planning and Zoning Commission, and thank you. I know you have a busy agenda tonight, so I'll try to be quick. I have to commend the Housing Authority and the Planning Director for the work that they've done here. The turnaround that we've seen over the last 2 years is astounding, and that's a really important source of affordable housing in the town, and that's something the Planning Commission really cares about, so we're happy to see that. Wanted to point out tomorrow, the Planning and Zoning Commission has 2 public hearings. It'll be 7 p.m., February 13th. We have a public hearing on the Plan of Conservation and Development, which the council has already seen. This is likely the final chance for the public or anyone else to make comments on our plan. So we welcome you to show up or to provide us written comments. We also have a public hearing on a potential regulation change for a potential technology park, which would allow us to land technology parks in town. All of the details for that are, of course, on the town website on those public hearings. So if you're curious, please check that out. Second, on your agenda tonight, you have the acceptance of the Eagles Landing open space at 79 Vinegar Hill. That's about 100 acres of open space that came from cluster subdivision that we approved earlier in the year. This open space connects to the Great Oak Greenway and protects a monstrous piece of reservoir watershed. And so, this is a really important piece that you guys are going to accept tonight. I'd also like to say that this is the first exercise of the updated cluster regs, where I think we got a cluster development that we actually wanted. And so, a minor pat on the back to the commission for following that through. Last comment is, I'm sorry, the Parkinson's left, the presentation on the Tri-Town Trail. That's a $30,000 piece of infrastructure being installed on town land. So that means the town is assuming liability and maintenance for that. It also means that should at least be subject to an 824 review by the Planning Commission. I assume we'll also need wetlands permits, so I hope the council moves forward with doing those referrals and making sure they ask the questions about maintenance and liability for all of that. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise...
Any questions? No minor pat on the back. We'll give you a major pat.
It is for the commission, not for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to review and approval of minutes. If somebody would make that motion for both those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. We have several communications which are in the portal. Don't believe there were any referrals. Council Subcommittee Liaison Reports. We'll start with admin.
Admin meant tonight there are multiple reappointments on the consent calendar, and also we voted to approve the STR as is. It's coming back to the council. That's on my report.
Thank you. Any questions? It's time. Finance.
Finance met this evening at 6, and we already covered the agenda item with the grant for the senior housing. And Finance also met last Wednesday, and those other action items are on the agenda for tonight.
Thank you. Land use?
Land use met last week. We moved forward the liquor ordinance, that moved forward to admin. Everything else that we had is on the agenda for tonight.
Very good. Liaison reports. To my left, John?
I attended the building committee meeting 2 weeks ago. I missed the last one. There's still some ongoing punch list items, the biggest one being the broken stair treads. When you step off the edge, you break off the nosing, that's the issue. The company's name is American Built Right, and they're out of Canada, so go figure. But ONG is being proactive. They have in their contract what's called the right to offset, which is this company is also doing work at another location for ONG, so they're withholding that money as well as this money. So they've really got their attention. So we're going to wait for the manufacturer to come up with a plan before we pull the plug in this company and go with somebody else. There's still some balancing issues and excessive noise in the heating system. That's an ongoing issue they're working on. There's still vermiculite coming out of the walls. Vermiculite is a granular insulation, like sand almost. When you build a concrete wall out of blocks, you pour it inside for insulation. Well, because it's so small, it comes out of small cracks that were caused by construction or age. So that's an ongoing issue that I can't believe we're still dealing with it. It's a simple fix, it's still an issue. The track's going good, the old track is gone, the drainage is being worked on now, and that's my report.
John, I mentioned that I've lived in town almost 50 years now. Has any building project ever not had a problem with the heating system?
Not since I've been on the council.
It's amazing. I remember when we built the building for Parks and Recs at the time, it was Parks and Recs and the Board of Education building, nothing but problems with the heat. I just don't get why that's always a problem. So, anyway, we have problems here with the heat too, didn't we? Yeah. All right.
I just wanted to make a comment on the Scallop Blue School project, that extra little barn garage thing that they're building.
Oh, yeah, the bike shed.
The bike shed?
Yeah.
Yeah. I pointed out to Liz as well as Dave Woody as well. I don't think they built it in the right location. I don't think it meets the setback requirements. So I think they may have to go for a variance.
I'll mention that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't notice it until they actually built the structure today on top of the foundation, and I drove by and went, that's not 50 feet from the side, the end of the road, so.
I'm assuming they applied for a building permit.
The building permit was approved.
Oh, okay, they
but
just,
I don't think that's in the right location.
okay. Stay tuned.
They'll check, they're gonna go check, they're gonna go measure it.
Minor glitch.
Any liaison reports on this side?
I have the Board of Ed.
Board of Ed?
Yeah. Board of Ed approved their budget. Their budget request is in the amount of $33,189,420, an increase over 2019-2020 of $640,851. It's a 1.97 increase. They will be coming to present their budget to the council in the next few weeks, I believe. And in the meantime, there are FAQs at ledyard.net.
I think it's important that people understand, because I've seen some chat online about the Board of Ed comparing budgets, and that Ledyard is a little bit unique in that the healthcare is not included in their budget. So the numbers always need to be explained, because while 1.9 sounds pretty doggone good, that does not include the huge increase in healthcare, simply because we choose to have it on the town side, where most towns, I believe most towns have it on the Board of Ed side. So, any other reports, comments? Okay, mayor report.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to add one quick thing. Mr. Cloutier had mentioned the new situation down at the Highland Lake Park. And I think one of the comments that he made might not have been completely accurate. So I just wanted this, I followed up on this today with the chief of police as well. And I'll just give you the summary here. But Officers Browning and McKinney responded, seized the rope as evidence, and notified the state's attorney's office and surrounding agencies, as well as the Connecticut Intelligence Center, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, and the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the incident. Chief Rich went on to meet with Representative Conley to update her on the matter as per her request, and also notified the New London chapter of the NAACP of the investigation and of the report. The investigation was suspended when efforts yielded no additional leads. So I just wanted to make sure, because I think he had identified that we kind of dead-ended it, and I would say that, no, I think a lot of effort was put into that. But I'm not done with that stuff yet, because I wanted to share a couple things in this process of educating myself. I wanted to share with you, so this right here, this is protected. This is not hate speech. This is considered art. And what you'll see here is the 45, which happens to be the president, the 45th president of the United States, which is Donald Trump. But they've cleverly used a swastika for that. Here was a Trump Pence sign, also with a swastika in somebody's yard. This one is a giant billboard that was posted outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And you can see what's on there with nuclear bombs going off in the background with Donald Trump. That was protected under free speech. This one was a homeowner's yard sign in Olmsted Township of Ohio. It too was a Trump sign with a red swastika on it. And I have plenty more, but I'm going to stop it with this one. This one is in Cape Coral, Florida. So this gentleman too had a Trump sign in his yard, and he woke up the next day to have a giant swastika painted on his garage door. So there are definitely, I mean, I have a lot of stuff here that I can pass through, but it's offensive. And I think part of the problem that we're seeing is that people are choosing to use something like a swastika as a means to convey maybe their own hatred or whatever the case may be. But I think it's a terrible idea to use probably the single most hated symbol in the world. that if you look anywhere at any types of symbols, nothing elicits a more painful response than to see a swastika and understand what it means. And maybe that's part of it, is people not understanding what it means. But I wanted to leave it at that. So thank you for that. I also had a parent call about this, and she was concerned she didn't want to drive by the sign with her children in the car. And I don't know the age of her children, but I guess I would look at it as an opportunity that, depending on the age of the child or children, instead of avoidance, that could have been an opportunity to have a conversation about what that symbol means. And maybe that helps to Councilor Washington's comments. Maybe that helps have that conversation. Might be uncomfortable, but it needs to happen. I also wanted to echo the concerns of Councilor Marshall regarding the school punch list. The list is over 400 items. We are well down the road with these schools. As you know, we have the HVAC problems. We have some issues with concrete at the Gallup Hill School. I have fielded several complaints from people on Town Farm Road about the lighting in the parking lots being on 24/7. So I wasn't comfortable with that either, so I contacted the Board of Ed, and that too is a punch list item, that there was some sort of automated lighting control system that's in place that is not working and has not been working from day one. So what is required at Gallup Hill School is that somebody has to trip the breaker every single day at some point in the night to turn it off, or you know, that's why they're on all night long, because somebody is then turning them off when they come in the morning. I think it's time we bring the hammer with the contractor, no pun intended, but I think it's time. I attended the Eagle Scout Award for Mark Riegert. Ledyard is plush with Eagle Scouts, and they keep coming, so I keep attending, and it's good to get to go to those events, and it's an honor, and it's great to see all these kids coming through the ranks, and I think it's 4% of all scouts end up as Eagle Scouts, so they're in a kind of an elite group. We had a municipal CEO meeting regarding short-term rentals. You'll hear more about that, but area towns got together to kind of find out what people are doing, and they are aware that Ledyard has moved an ordinance down the road a bit, so they wanted to hear more about that. So I shared with them our draft copy, and we had a conversation about that. And there's a lot of pros and cons about them. In New London's case, they've seen a number of homes that were somewhat derelict houses that have been purchased and renovated completely and used as short-term rentals, so they have reason to believe that it's a plus for them too. Still completing the budget work. We spent better part of today working on that. There are certainly some challenges in that budget, but I am very confident that we are going to have that number pared down dramatically by the time it comes to the Finance Committee and by the time I deliver it to the Council on March 2nd. Events Magazine deadline is coming up. That is February 18th. I know, Linda, you have gotten something in already.
For the council.
Yep, which is fantastic. The responses from the residents on that have been excellent so far. Understanding it's only our first issue, but been very good. A lot of committees and commissions want to be in there. We're trying to add more space as we can to allow all the committees and commissions a piece. We just need additional advertisers to allow us to get more pages, which will allow us to get more content. I met with the regional director of the 2020 census on February 4th. As Councilor McGrattan alluded to, their jobs are available, $23 plus an hour, which is really great. Ledyard is creating a committee for the survey itself. The impact on Ledyard, the last census, 1 out of every 5 Ledyard residents was not counted. So 20% of our population. So imagine if your budget at home was based on the census, and somebody said to you, sorry, 20% of your budget just got taken off the table. That's what can happen to not just Ledyard, but the state of Connecticut. So it's really important. If you don't do it online or on the phone or via mail, they will visit your house as many as 12 times. So they are persistent and they will get to you. So just do it one of the first 3 ways and then you won't even have a knock on the door.
Good campaigners, huh?
So April 1st, incidentally, is Census Day. So be ready to do it. So many people have the ability to do it online. I know, it happens to be April Fool's Day, but it is in fact Census Day.
That was a bad,
That's not a joke.
that was not a smart move.
No.
Because the letters are coming out on the 12th of
Yep,
March.
March, right, exactly.
You can respond before April 1st. It's just that
Yeah,
April
that's-
1st is the cutoff. So they have to draw a line in the sand somewhere because of babies being born. So babies that are born March 30th would count in this census. If your baby is born on April 2nd, they would not.
Right. And it's very important because if you think about an 8-year-old not being counted, the next time that child is counted, that child is 18 years old and has probably already been completely through our school system and was never accounted for in town.
And children under 5 are the most undercounted in the census.
And there's nothing sensitive, there's no kind of sensitive data that is collected from this, so people don't need to worry about that. We've also scheduled an economic development summit meeting with what they used to call CERC. You probably remember the acronym CERC, Connecticut Economic Resource Center. The governor has changed that name. It is now Advanced CT. But they are doing a presentation for us, a presentation and a workshop to kind of say, what does Ledyard want to be from an economic standpoint? The study is paid for by Eversource, so it's paid for by you. Thank you very much. And we do hope that the entire town council will attend, land use and planning commissions will attend, representatives and senators that are in our district would attend. So a formal invitation will be going out on that, but that is March 19th, 5:30 to 7:30. Just a quick thank you to LICEF. Attended LICEF today, as did Councilor McGrattan. They awarded 3 grants today. They've done incredible work for people, for residents of the town of Ledyard, and my assistant provided the news to one of them today, and the woman was just hysterical in a very good way. So I think it kind of made her day, and that's really good to hear. And then the last item for you is the survey of police departments in the country was just completed for the 2018 statistics, and Ledyard ranked 19th in the state of Connecticut after Wilton, so pretty prestigious Fairfield County towns. We're doing all right, and we were 122nd out of 1,246 towns of similar population as our own out of the state. So essentially we were in the top 10% of the country.
What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. What are the
Safest
metrics?
community. So they look at the 5, basically 5 most heinous crimes, but that does include things like, robbery, rape, murder, pretty horrible things, but it doesn't include, like Baltimore, Maryland, let's say, wouldn't be comparable to us. So we're not compared to them. We are compared to places like Norwich, New London, so something that's 10,000 people or larger, but not a true large city. So that was a positive thing to see. I always like to finish these with the things that we've dealt with. It's always nice to finish on a more positive note.
I've observed that here.
Oh, you've picked up. Thank you. That's all I have for you tonight.
Anybody have any questions for the mayor? Yes.
Hey, I heard a report that with the track and field project at the high school, that the contractor was actually trucking the dirt out of town.
Shouldn't be. There were about 1,700 cubic yards of topsoil that came off that field, and it should all be going to Public Works. That the transfer station, they were stockpiling it all there with the understanding that they need about 500 cubic yards of that back. They initially were going to truck it all out of town, and then they made this arrangement because we had wanted some for the town green. So they had made the arrangement to say, bring it up there. It cuts down substantially on your trucking.
I heard reports that when the trucks were coming up to the stops, like they were taking a left and heading down 117.
Okay, so the only thing I could think of in that case is if they were reloading, because they've also been backhauling gravel.
Yeah, I knew they were bringing gravel.
So you saw them,
Somebody,
yeah.
and this is somebody who was saying to me that they were coming from the school with a load of dirt and they were taking a left at the line
Okay.
instead of a right.
I'm not aware of all of that. I know that a substantial amount of it is at the transfer station, but I couldn't account for all the trucks for sure.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, other more questions? Hearing none, we will, your time is coming. Time is coming.
We're getting there.
We have no old business. Would anybody like to amend the agenda under new business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve, well, first of all, would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's made and seconded. Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Lots of good people there. Finance.
I make a motion to appropriate $138,510 to account number 210701001-5820 BOE CNR Reserve Account upon receipt of the final FY 2020 ASTI grant payment for items outlined in the Board of Education fiscal year 2020 comprehensive list for agri-science program. In addition, approve the transfer of $138,510 from general fund account number 101-882-210-59300 transferred funds to CNR account 201-1402-49002 transfers in upon receipt of the final FY 2020 ASTI grant payment.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Whew. Discussion.
They've already approved this, as you know, because it's in the newspaper.
Yes.
So, originally, what the board had asked for was to spend the money in advance before we receive the final ASTI payment. After further discussion and looking at what the formal or even informal policy of the town is, that is not something that we would do or should do just based on our history with state funding. So they won't be getting that money until we get the final ASTI grant payment.
Any questions? And, it gets to my whole process conversation again. The Board of Ed probably, well, they shouldn't have approved this until they brought it to the council first. So it's always about.
And they did recognize that was a mistake.
Oh,
when
okay.
they said, well, you're right, we didn't kind of.
Okay, so you covered that for me.
Yeah. No, well, I didn't cover it for it. They just, Bill Solms, Councilor Solms, and the superintendent and chair of BOE Finance had a discussion offline.
Very good. Okay, any questions? Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Abstain.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
7 in favor, 1 abstention.
Motion carries. Next item.
I move that we authorize the town to offer the current R11 for sale with reserve. In addition, authorize the use of the proceeds from the sale of R11 and up to $555,000 from account number 210-2040-54325 to purchase a replacement engine.
Did somebody second? Okay. Discussion?
Who seconded?
Okay.
Mayor.
So this engine, we have discussed this engine before. I'm going to read you the background information, and Steve Holyfield is the new you're the AES director. They split the role. And I'm going to invite Steve and John Mann to clarify the technical details because I don't completely understand them all. I'm not going to talk to you about repairing an engine. You'll be sorry if I do. But I am going to read you the background information. This has been a complicated issue for a good year and a half. So in January of 2019, R11 had a major engine failure that took almost a year to resolve with the manufacturer. The failure is part of a known issue with the Navistar Max Force engine. However, the manufacturer paid only a portion of the repair cost. Customer service provided by International Navistar was substandard. The lack of communication by the company resulted in unacceptable delays in repair completion. During the year-long repair, research of the engine problem uncovered information that the Navistar engine installed in R11 has a chronic history of failures due to the configuration of the EGR components to meet the latest EPA standards. In order to meet the EPA standards, this particular engine runs at an unusually high temperature rate. That high engine temperature rate causes premature failure of multiple engine components in the long term. Research shows an approximate 80% failure rate of these components. I'm going to move on. So basically where we're at is we have a decision to make to either try to sell the engine and get a different engine, or attempt to refit the engine, refit the rig with a new engine. Steve Holyfield is new to the role. He was able to look at the issue with a fresh set of eyes. And frankly, neither option is fabulous, but plan A is to try to sell it. And if we don't meet a particular reserve, then we go to plan B, which is refit the rig. Did I explain it okay?
More or less, yeah.
More or less.
So I'm gonna speak for you.
I can elaborate a little more.
I'll elaborate a little bit. So, the reason I didn't move or second this motion is because I'm not supporting it. I'll just say that right now. I know more about fire engines than I ever wanted to know, even as an 8-year-old kid, and wanted to be a fireman. And why do I know that? Because we've had 2 engines over the last year that have spent more time in garages than they've spent on the road. So much so that we had to go out and buy a used engine to probably meet NFPA requirements to have enough water in town to bring to a fire. So after many discussions and tribulations and issues going with Steve's predecessor, Chief Mann, we now have how many fire engines in the town, Steve? How many engines?
Currently 5 that are capable.
You're counting the ladder, right?
Only 4 of them are in service.
Right, right. So we have 4. We have 4. And we went out and bought a used engine that is not really recommended under the NFPA guidelines, is it?
It's an older engine.
It's more than 20 years old. Which that is the NFPA guideline. So NFPA is National Fire Protection Act. So that's kind of the guidelines we use to how many hoses, how many, depending on your size. So I know a little bit about that. I'm not a fireman. I don't pretend to be. But I know a lot more than I want to right now. So we have 3 engines that are working fine, 1 that is in reserve. Is that correct?
No, we have 4 engines that are working fine currently because we picked up that next purchase of the green one that you all have seen driving around town.
Right, and that's in
we
reserve.
have this one, R11, which came back from being fixed and it has not been placed back in service yet.
So it's in reserve, but it's operational.
It could be. It needs a couple more things, and it could be operational within a short amount of time.
And we think we can get between 200,000 and 230,000 if we sell it as is.
We do.
That's the number I've heard thrown around. Is that true?
We haven't had a fair appraisal on it. That's actually why we're making this.
Yeah,
motion.
we had a broker gave a number of between $200,000 and $230,000.
Do we think that's a realistic number? I'm not, if you don't know, just say you don't.
Given the motor that's in it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're probably going to get closer to 2 than 230. So 200. So now we have 200,000. Let's say we get to 200,000 conservative value, and you're asking for another 500, up to 550,000 from your SIP account. correct? To go out and buy a new motor, or a new engine rather, and we haven't spec'd anything out, we haven't, because you're waiting to move on the motion, so you know how much money you can spend.
We're doing a lot of behind the scenes work. There's a lot of work that the chiefs from Ledyard Fire have done to start to work on the spec process. They haven't dove into it to the point where that's the only option. They're still maintaining the other options that are available that I had outlined in my recommendations. But they have worked on it, and they do have a technical direction they would go with this apparatus.
Well,
So it's
with that said, I would say at your pleasure. Sell me your idea, or sell us your idea. If these guys don't have any other questions, I think.
Actually, based upon the discussion that I've just heard, we think we have what we think we can get for the truck, you're not sure. We think we have an idea if we're gonna buy a new truck, what it's gonna be, we don't know yet. I'm gonna say we table this motion until you do have an idea.
Actually, we do have a...
When you bring it to me in writing.
But here's what we can't do, Kevin. We cannot disclose a reserve because that just blows everything.
No.
That is a
I
negotiation.
want a plan. I understand. I know what you're saying, Fred, okay? But the problem is we think we know what we might be able to get for the truck. I understand. I'll go along with the broker deal. But until I know what we want to buy,
I can tell you right now, we've had this discussion with finance as well.
the rest of the council doesn't know.
We can talk about it right now.
No, I'm not ready to talk about it right now.
I have to agree with the counselor. Forget about what happens with the motor, because we know we got something, a vehicle that we have a question on the motor. No question. So the real question is, do you take the motor out, forget about, assume the motor is garbage. The question is, do you take the motor out or do you buy a new fire truck? That should be easy enough to put on a piece of paper hand, because that's separate of the issue.
It's in my recommendations, it's from the agenda packet.
Well,
would you like me to share that with you, or I'll come up and kind of give you my... So, when I took over about 6 weeks ago as AES, I did a lot of research back through all the information that my predecessor, Russ, had had. There were a variety of conversations.
Can I just apologize? I was a little overbearing before. I want to
Appreciate it.
apologize.
Thank
I
you.
want to apologize.
He's only been on the job 6 weeks.
You know what?
It's been a whirlwind of a month.
You know, I shoved you pretty hard.
And I really hope
I
this,
apologize.
I hear your concerns, and I 100% hear your concerns, and part of the reason I can't tell you definitively is because I haven't been given approval to even go market this thing yet. So if I don't have the approval to, yes, we may sell it with the reserve.
So part of me is a little less concerned of what we think we can get to the truck. I understand that part. But the part of me that is more concerned about is what do we think we want to go buy?
And I can get to that as well. So what I do is I had to go through a whole host of emails. It's taken me almost 2 weeks to get through all the emails and learn the track record on this. I've had several meetings with Chief Mann and his officers' corps. I did a lot of research, which you guys, I know you've done it, Councilor Malone as well, in terms of some of the Google and stuff. And anytime you Google Navistar Max Force engines, you all of a sudden get a bunch of lawsuits, to the point where you had actually mentioned Boston when we had our finance meeting. And I spoke with Craven Associates, I have his bio and stuff. It's about 6 pages long. It killed some trees in printing it out. He's pretty much the expert. He's been involved in every one of the 47 lawsuits in dealing with this motor. And he informed me that the city of Boston, which had 14 of these, I don't want to call them engines, because when you talk firefighter, use engine means something that puts water out. This motor that's been installed in this fire engine, there's been 14 of these in the city of Boston. And what happened was when Boston started developing these problems, they were in a KME fire truck. They just used the same motor. They pulled them immediately off the line. They filed a lawsuit. There was also in the wake of a double line of duty death that happened in 2014, and that's all over the media as well, so that's a very searchable thing. And they waged a lawsuit versus the parent company, which was International. And those apparatus, they actually stuck them off to the side in the garage, and they went and they bought all the new emergency 1 apparatus right off the bat. And then at some point down the road, when everything panned out, they actually did repower it with Cummins motors, and they were able to keep them only in reserve status. They're not frontline fire trucks. So Boston has a large fleet. As you and I had talked, they never saw duty in terms of being that assigned piece to that firehouse. They kept them in reserve. It was a motor pool thing. If another truck broke down, they put them in service for a week or 2 while Boston's fleet maintenance dealt with it and all that. So anyway, coming back full score on this, Our first action that I evaluated was no action. What happens if we place the apparatus in service? We monitor it for performance. If it blows up, we go ahead and fix it, and it goes from there. Our rough numbers on what we had paid, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have my packet right in front of me, it was somewhere in the area of $35,000 between the motor repair, the parts that were covered, because we did get some in-kind donation kind of parts from International, the purchase of R12, because at one point we didn't have a fire engine to put in Ledyard, so we actually took the one of the engines from Gales Ferry and shipped it up here for a period of time because we didn't have fire apparatus. Things were broken down, things had been in accidents, and we had to make the best of it. So that's that non-NFPA required engine that you were talking about. Is that was a stopgap measure so that we had something for our firefighters to be able to get in and go service the calls. And that's what that was. We don't know how long that's going to last. It's what year? 92, so it's an old fire truck. It could last another 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It could last till tomorrow, and they might go in and find something catastrophic with it. I don't know. Again, I'm not a mechanic. I haven't looked at the apparatus in terms of mechanical stuff, and I'm not going to offer my opinion on that. My concern as AES is some of the impacts to the budgets, and I mentioned to that. If we're talking a $30,000 repair at some point down the road, or a $20,000 repair for this motor, it's a 6-year-old truck. It's already had issues. They did not do a full tear down of it, so there could be underlying issues. And one of the things Councilor Solms was concerned about was anything that's below the point that they had dealt with. In other words, there's been contamination of oil and coolant in this motor. We don't know how things look under the head, the bearings, etc. So we could be sitting on a ticking time bomb with that. We don't know. We haven't delved into it. Unfortunately, that also costs a lot of money. In my opinion, I think this could happen up to 2 more times in the lifespan of the vehicle. Right? We try to keep our fire trucks for 20 years. It's already been 6. We've had an issue. Who knows? To your point, you mentioned New London when we were talking in finance. I do know New London had 2 of these motors, and you are correct that they did fix them, and they are on the road 2 years later, and they're fine. They are also in dump trucks. Dump trucks and fire trucks are 2 completely different beasts. When a call goes off, we get in a fire truck, it doesn't come up to operating temperature. We go handle the call under different conditions than a dump truck that Public Works starts up, runs, it gets properly lubricated, it runs for 6, 8, 10 hours in a day, or it's plowing snow for 24 hours and then they shut it off. So the fire truck stuff is a lot more severe service than the actual dump truck stuff are in terms of the lack of lubrication of the motor and how hard that they operate on that. Another option was to retrofit the motor with what they call an SCR technology, it's selective catalytic reduction. What happened with Navistar back in 2011-12, there was a major EPA change. That EPA change, most of the places wound up going with what they call the DEF solution. I don't know if anybody's familiar with DEF, but it's urea-based diesel exhaust. We have it on the ladder truck, actually, that was purchased at Gales Ferry. It's just simply, it's urea that's injected into the system. It does some stuff in terms of cleaning up the emissions control. International didn't want to do that. They engineered this whole thing with the oil cooler, the EGR cooler. They learned several years later, 2014, 15, with this whole series of lawsuits and failures, that technology doesn't really work. So that's one option we have, is to go and retrofit the vehicle with the diesel exhaust fluid stuff. I personally called a couple of International dealers. I said, have you done it? And they said, no. I said, would you be interested in doing it? And they said, we'd actually charge you to even give you a quote because there's so much engineering in this, we don't want to get involved with that. I said, okay, fair enough, that's probably not a good option. Next was repower with a Cummins motor. Not a bad option at all. Probably in the between 65,000 and 100,000 range, depending on what we need for the motor, the engineering, the addition of different catalytic components. So that remains to be seen, but that's a rough guesstimate based on what I've read for a lot of the other agencies that have done this. And then my final, which is where we're at, was to sell and replace the apparatus. And I mentioned here in my report that Ledyard's tanker was taken out of service in 2016 for a variety of different reasons. It was largely unserviceable. We were doing some fleet reduction, and we recognized, and actually Chief Mann approached me and he said, hey, with the 1,000 gallons of water that's in R11 currently, that gives us about 5 minutes of flow time when we have somebody in a building on a hose line. And for the areas that aren't hydrant protected, he's not real comfortable with that. Their next closest water supply is typically coming from Gales Ferry with the tanker. We all know the difference between Ledyard and Gales Ferry. It's about a 8-minute, 9-minute response time difference. So if we had something just the other side of Ledyard Firehouse and there were no hydrants, that's how long they're waiting on. So we're actually going to have some delays in our ability to suppress fire based on the amount of water. He initially said, I'm looking at something, maybe if we're going to do this, 2,000, 2,500 gallons of water. that effectively doubles, if not 2.5 times, the amount of water that he can carry. So now we're up in that 10 to 15 minute range, where if we have bad roads, that could be 15 minutes, could be very potential coming from Gales Ferry up the hill. I mean, we've all driven up by Goulart and stuff, and we know how the hills are. We've had issues in town before with the roadways. Certainly no reflection on Public Works or the state, but let's face it, we live in New England and sometimes things happen, be it a tree across the road or, you know, anything like that.
Ice.
Yeah, ice especially, yep. So that was Chief Mann's proposal, was he wanted to replace R11 with an engine tanker configuration. That's what we call the cross between the engine and the tanker. It's kind of a hybrid. It's not the 3,000 gallon elliptical that Gales Ferry has. It's a pared back version of that. His current guesstimate, you know, he's been kind of playing with the numbers on the 700,000, which there's a vehicle replacement schedule that I believe I added in the packet. I have copies of that if anybody wants to see that in print, because I know it's difficult on the iPads and all that stuff, so I can give that to you if you guys would like. Another issue, and so this is where Councilor Ingalls said this is multifaceted, and here's kind of your answer on this. We're not just fixing the engine problem, we're fixing a couple of maybe purchasing issues that we've been trying to fix for a couple of years. And to the point with when they sold R12, there was a purchasing issue there. This purchasing issue that's had the compressed air foam system on it, it was built in the 2010, 11, 12 era of being the latest, greatest thing in firefighting. Some agencies went with it. They had great luck with it. It's a Class A foam, so it's used for burning buildings, and it's used to try to do things with limited water. It hasn't really worked for this town very well, admittedly. So that's another facet that we're trying to fix. And then my personal thought was, as I'm looking around at some of the numbers, I think in the vehicle replacement schedule, we can do this without any major tweaks. We had shifted a couple apparatus back and forth on the replacement times. I think it's doable financially, and I've already had a conversation with the chief, as I know the mayor has, that, you know, this is a apparatus that the town needs, not the town wants, and so it needs to be designed as such with no whistles and bells and frills on it, so that it's a very functional apparatus that's going to last us 20 years going forward to meet our needs. Let's face it, there's not a lot of, I think it was 35% of town has hydrants, is that the number you had? So 35% of the town is hydrant protected, and so the remaining 65, I think I did that in my head real quick, is not hydrant protected. And that's a concern. You know, certainly if we can't get water out of the hydrants, then we need to bring the water with us, and we have that ability on the Gales Ferry side. We don't have much of that ability on the Ledyard side. So those are kind of my points on where we were going with this. We've already had some good conversations about their vision for the apparatus. I think they're right in line with that. I know that Chief Sacone's in agreement with it as well as Chief Mann. I actually was a little bit involved with it prior to my role as AES, being a member at Gales Ferry, so I've been privy to some of the conversations. But I think that's what we need to do, and I think that's why my suggestion is here.
So let me roll back my comment.
Okay.
My comment isn't that I think that the plan
Okay.
isn't the right plan.
Mm-hmm.
My issue is that we're gonna sit here and whatever we get for the truck, we get for the truck. And then we're gonna take this amount of money and say, go buy a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you guys have in your mind what you want, but we don't know what that's gonna cost. And is that the right number? That's where I'm going.
Oh, that's absolutely right.
Okay, so is that what we think we're gonna get for the truck plus the 550? Is that gonna be the right number?
Yes. Absolutely.
That's my feeling.
And I was trying.
Because I have nothing in the packet that tells me that that's the right number for a replacement vehicle.
What we did on that is we spec'd out a truck with just about everything we need on it to be able to do it, and then went around to different manufacturers.
That's what we're playing
got
with?
Prices and base it off of that.
And that's just a placeholder to kind of make sure that all the rest of this doesn't get thrown off for the plan.
Yeah, that's okay, that's the money.
So,
But
yeah.
I'm just saying, okay, but when you actually go say, hey, fire truck guy, that you sell me.
We talked to, 4 different manufacturers, got their base numbers on the idea that we want.
Okay.
And then we,
That's the,
They're
those are the
both
numbers I don't see.
Unfortunately, the town
That's-
works on a low bid system, so.
No.
Unfortunately.
No, what I'm saying is, we can't go to them and say, give us a price for this piece of apparatus. We can go to them and say, we need, give us a good guesstimate based on these specs. So we've gone to 3 or 4 different manufacturers, we've sat down, we've narrowed down our spec, and we've
So that's the numbers I want to see.
And that's admittedly something that we've done with every apparatus.
No.
We work with the vendor, we design it.
You're missing my point. Is that you've gone to the vendors and said, hey, I want a truck that does X, Y, and Z. And they've given you a guesstimate of what we think it's gonna cost.
Yep. But if
Wait,
we tell
wait,
you
but-
that in a council meeting, it's public knowledge, when they come and bid it, they'll know what the bid price is.
In the interest of competitive bid.
That's okay, whatever.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What happens if it doesn't hit the reserve? Are we back here looking for more money?
Yes. No.
Because we're a year
No.
later?
We go to Plan B.
And this
We
is the
refit.
conversation we've had, is that if it doesn't meet whatever our reserve is, and I was trying to not let any information out on a public meeting as far as what we thought we were gonna get,
Yep.
because I don't wanna cut our negotiating power
Yeah.
underneath us, right? And that's the conversation the mayor and I had, and we had it with finance. If this doesn't sell for whatever that number is that we already have agreed is our ballpark, this doesn't happen. The rig doesn't get sold. We go to the next thing. The next thing may be, after we talk and discuss it a little bit more, it may be, hey, put that rig in service, and if the motor fails and we have these issues, then you know what, we're gonna yank it out, we're gonna put a Cummins in there. And that's the time where we're gonna have to go back to the well, which is that apparatus replacement. And if it's 65,000, great. If it's 100,000, it is what it is. That's the decision that we're gonna make. But I think we would be, I think, and again, we're trying to solve more than just the motor issue here. We're trying to solve a lot of things and right the ship, so to speak, on some of the purchases that have been done.
So,
Now would be a good time to do that rather than,
so that's what's missing from the motion. Is that there's a plan B.
Okay, so I'm trying to count noses here, but I will let the finance people decide whether they want to have this tabled or we want to count, because I'm counting noses and there is a potential this is going to fail.
Well, when I look at this, because in addition to authorize the use of proceeds from the sale up to $550,000, if they go $550,001, they're out. Because they're only asking for $550,000. That's what this is telling me. You're gonna get. You're hoping you get so much for the motor, right? And then on top of whatever you get for the motor, you're gonna spend another $550,000.
that was
So if
the
you
plan,
don't-
is 550 from the reserve plus whatever the proceeds are. That's why that lower, that floor would be
Yep.
on our marketing. Now, also to add, we have a couple ways that we can go. One is to broker this. So in other words, it would be like, we would call a company like, and this isn't just, there's companies in Connecticut that do this, like New England Fire Appers is one of them. I'm not saying we're gonna use them. They'll probably get a phone call and get the possibility of, entertaining an idea. We can have them broker it, which means they market it and they put it on websites and they try to find a buyer for this rig and get us the most money, and they take their little cut.
Yep.
Another option is, and I had a meeting 2 weeks ago, I think, with Specialty Vehicles Incorporated out of Massachusetts, who is the Ferrera area representative, and they feel like they have egg on their face out of this apparatus. And they took photos of it, and they're trying to do their own assessment on what they think it's worth, with the idea that maybe they might be able to do something on an invoice to say, okay, you want this rig, it's gonna be this much through the bid, now we're gonna knock off X amount of dollars off of that and make this whole. So that's really why we're here, is we're trying to get the approval to go start maybe marketing this and feeling the water. Certainly, we're not gonna sell this fire truck if somebody offers us $10,000.
Right.
That's no secret, I'm not giving anything
Right.
away, it's not going anywhere.
I think what I'm taking out of this though from this motion is that it's really about being able to get the $550,000. But if you need, I'm going to throw a number out there, crazy number, $2 million. If you don't sell that motor for enough to cover that gap, then you got to come back anyway.
If we were looking at a $1.1 million apparatus and I said 550 out of here, that means we better get our, what's that, 650 or whatever it is, or out of that, or 550, another 550 out of the sale.
Okay, we ready to vote, folks? Okay, Roxanne, which,
Of
the motion?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were gonna table it.
No, I'm gonna
no.
just hope for the best.
All right.
Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Okay. Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
No.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 7 in favor and 1 not in favor.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, I am going to move item number 14, with your permission, up because I asked Mr. France to be here. If you remember at the last meeting, we gave the representatives 30 minutes to discuss, and this was part of the discussion. And unfortunately, Mr. France never got a word in, so.
He did not, you're right.
He didn't. And so I just wanted to make sure he was here in case anybody had a question, because we voted this down. Now, this raises an interesting question. Did we vote this motion down, or did we never vote on it?
We never voted on it, I don't think.
We were all over the place. That was the one that there were.
I think we voted it down, but I could look it up. if you need.
Because we can't just bring it back up. Sorry for thinking about this just at the second.
We did vote it down.
Yeah, we did, we voted against
Just go
this.
look at something.
There were a couple,
I think
like,
I
I
voted
remember,
for it, that's
I
why.
abstained, there were 2 abstentions, there were,
I voted against
I
it.
voted
Yeah.
against it.
yes. it got
Okay, so
voted down, I
now
think.
we have to see how the vote went, because don't we then, oh, Mr. France, I'm so glad you're here, because you'll know what, how do we bring it back up?
Well, since you moved past the ability to amend the agenda, what's the agenda?
Just vote to adopt
Approve.
the resolution.
Resolution in support of.
Well, just because you voted it down the first time, it's still a vote to approve a resolution.
And it's substantially changed.
Yeah, so maybe, it doesn't matter what it's standing, it could be the same. You
It's
could
a new-
vote, you
it's a
could vote
new-
every meeting
it's a new
on a
motion.
resolution, it's a new motion.
Okay, that's what
It's
I
a new
need
motion.
clarification
You could
on.
vote every meeting, down, 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 and finally you go, okay, I'm worn out, I don't want to vote no anymore, I vote yes.
Okay.
You know, nothing's changed in the underlying bill.
Okay, I thought that if a motion was voted down, that in order to put it back on the agenda, a certain amount of people had to vote.
It's a new
motion.
It's a new motion.
Item.
Yeah.
It was considered before, in fact, you're bringing forward a different bill.
Oh, that's true, it is a different
But
bill.
it's
That's right.
irrelevant if
Yeah,
you're
that's
coming back for reconsideration as a new motion.
Okay,
Just
so
because you voted it down in the previous
Oops.
meeting, you could bring it back.
Roxanne, we're set, sorry about that. Mayor,
Yep.
part of the reason we voted it down is the mayor wasn't particularly thrilled about it. You're good with this now,
Yeah,
correct?
so there were some key pieces of this legislation that didn't seem to make any what I felt were necessary changes. As you know, I was very outspoken about the Pequot Fund, how that formulation was made, and how my feeling was we've never been recognized as a host community. Not a host community of a gaming enterprise, but a host community of the reservation itself. And that comes at a cost, which includes the education of the children. I'm not opposed to educating them by any means. I just felt like we were not being reasonably compensated out of the Pequot Fund. So this newest draft that was presented now includes an additional $750,000 to the town of Ledyard. And equally, if not more important, it includes 100% funding, pilot funding for reservation lands by the state. So Representative France, I know, has read this bill in its entirety. I called him and asked him some questions about, there was somewhere in there where they would add $7 million from the new East Windsor facility to the pot, and then it was kind of a line out and a change to $9 million. So my feeling was that just an arbitrary change? And Representative France said, no, it was not an arbitrary change. It was actually an error. When they first made the bill, it was supposed to be 9. So that made me feel better. The other portion of that was that I said, who's to say they ever meet a number of like $9 million? And how conservative is that number? And the representative was comfortable that it is in fact a conservative number. So, because the way it reads is, unless and until that fund hits $9 million, there are no distributions. So my fear was, it never hits 9 million, they put some arbitrary number on it and say, well, you're gonna get $750,000, but if there's nothing in the pot, you're getting 100% of nothing. So that does not appear to be the case. And then the other equally important one was, let me scroll down to the lines. If you get to look at that 39-page draft, it's lines 1085 to 1090, which specifically talks about the changes to the CGS statutes, revising them and replacing the language for lines 1123 to 1126, which includes 100% of the property taxes that would have been paid on any land designated within the 1983 settlement boundary and taken into trust by the federal government for the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation on or after June 8th, 1999. So those changes were substantial, and those changes were something that I felt makes Ledyard closer to whole.
Representative France, any comments?
Yeah, so to be clear, on the East Windsor facility, what happened was originally there were 10 towns that were getting $750,000 each, which was a $7.5 million project. So before it came to the floor for vote, they added 2 more towns, but they neglected to increase the 7.5 to 9 million. And so that's the reason it went for 7.5. And as far as that threshold affects that revenue stream only. It does not affect the other revenue streams that are there. So the now 12 towns that are receiving $750,000 each comes directly from the revenue from the East Windsor facility. The other things that are in this new bill, which relate to the new $750,000 line item, comes from the increased amount of Pequot money that's going to the towns. So historically, when we talked about this before, but the first year that the Pequot Fund was in effect, it had $110 million in revenue and $88 million went to the towns, so 80%. Over time, the legislature has reduced that number down to this current year. We have about $270 million coming from the gaming interests, and only $50 million approximately is going to the towns. So what Senator Austin has put into this bill has come forward is to raise the number from about $50 million to about $140 million, which is the highest dollar amount that has ever been provided to the towns. And that, in that additional roughly $90 million is where the $750,000 comes, as well as changing the valuation of tribal land from either 25 or 45% of value to 100% of value for the town of Ledyard. So that's the background on it and what is being trying to be attempted in this bill. And where that revenue comes from, it is said, is basically taking it out of what is now going to the general fund, and that comes out of the new gaming. The estimate out of the new gaming is more than this additional money that is being brought forward. So that's by about 10%. And those estimates, based on how we were briefed by 2 tribes, that is a conservative estimate at the low end of what they believe that will derive from the new gaming interest.
Any questions for Representative France?
Seems like we're in a better place.
Yeah.
And no 18-year-olds gambling.
Correct. Correct. They did take that out.
Yeah.
What about the drinking hours? Wasn't that in there as well?
That is still in.
That's still in.
I'm still amazed that the other towns signed that so quickly.
I won't know. I don't know whether they read it or not.
I have to, so they signed it so quick, how could they have read it?
And to clarify something that the senator said when she was here last time, she didn't talk to the chief of police in Montville because there is no chief of police. Now, actually, the mayor is the chief of police in Montville. Talked to Lieutenant Bonnell, who was the lieutenant at the police force who's now retired. That's who she talked with to get her assessment. There would be no impact on the town to do that. But I will say that is only based on what the tribes have said, how they will implement that, which is their intention that they have stated is to tie it to the key card at their establishment. So if somebody is drinking, they will be a resident of the hotel that is there and not be getting on the road at 4 o'clock in the morning. That is their intent, but it is not in statute. So, and I would say it's not appropriate to put that in statute. It is a regulatory function.
Okay, neglected to kind of follow Robert's rules here. I realize we did not put the motion. I don't believe the motion was ever made. You have that in your notes?
No, it was moved and it failed. It was too.
No, I'm talking about this motion. New one.
Oh, no, the motion's on there.
No. We have not made the motion. The motion is not on the floor.
Thank you.
So
Oh, that's
I'll make a
because,
motion to adopt
that's
the resolution.
because I was looking for the minutes.
Right. I'll make a motion to adopt the proposed resolution in support of the Connecticut Job and Revenue Act as contained in the draft dated February 10, 2020.
Second, there's motions made and seconded. I'm not going to ask for any discussion unless somebody really wants to say something, but I think we had it prematurely. Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Mr. Malone?
Aye. Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you, Representative France.
Good night.
And I wish it really was item number 14, but now we are moving back to 8.
I make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a service lease agreement between the town of Ledyard and the Ledyard Congregational Church to operate the municipality's food pantry as contained in the draft dated January 23, 2020, in accordance with Chapter 3, Section 4 of the town charter.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Things are going well.
Well, yeah.
Doesn't seem to be any reason to change plans, so with
Nothing but
that,
good news. They're expanding though. And I don't want to belabor this, but they're looking to get some expanded storage. That's how much donations are now.
yes,
That's the good news.
yes. Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item is number 10.
I make a motion to accept road widening strips of land along Long Cove Road dedicated to the town of Ledyard as part of the Flatbrook subdivision as approved by the Ledyard Planning and Zoning Commission on 11/9/2017, and being more particularly shown on a certain map or plan entitled Plan Shown Flatbrook Subdivision, property of Green Falls Associates LLC, 1066 Long Cove Road, Ledyard, Connecticut, July 2017, revised December 13, 2017, per conditions of approval, sheet 2 of 6.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Kevin?
Standard
Standard
operations, building the road and granting the towns right away.
Okay. Any questions? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
I make a motion to accept road widening strips of land along Vinegar Hill Road dedicated to the town of Ledyard as part of Eagles Landing Open Subdivision, as approved by the Ledyard Planning and Zoning Commission on February 14, 2019, and being more particularly shown and designated as open space on certain maps or plans entitled Plan Shown Eagles Landing Open Space Subdivision, property of Mr. G1 LLC, 79 Vinegar Hill Road, Ledyard, Connecticut, July 2018, sheets 1 through 15A, revised to December 28, 2019.
Second.
Okay, did we swap those, or are they just wrong on mine?
They might have got moved around on the thing.
Okay, because, mine are opposite, but that's okay.
Yeah, they probably got moved around.
Roxanne, would you call the, any questions?
Same
Roxanne,
thing.
would you call the roll? Same thing.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
Motion to accept 102.25 acres and 179 square feet of open space land dedicated to the town at 79 Vinegar Hill Road as part of the Eagles Landing Open Space Subdivision as approved by the Ledyard Planning and Zoning Commission on February 14, 2019, and being more particularly shown and designated as open space on certain maps or plans entitled Plan Showing Eagles Landing Open Space Subdivision, property of Mr. G1 LLC, 79 Vinegar Hill Road, Ledyard, Connecticut, July 2018, sheets 3 of 15, revised to December 28, 2019.
Second.
So this is, as Mr. Woody made earlier, this is the, from the subdivision that they're approved, granting the open space. This is a really good part for us to have.
Yes.
This is a good one.
This is a good one.
This is a good one. This is well worth.
It's not swamp.
This is not swampland. This has got some good trails and stuff like
What's
that.
the 180 square feet?
I have no idea. I don't remember.
I was just gonna ask that
It's not
question.
this.
I know.
Bill Somm's tree stand.
Yeah. That's the next one.
Any
them,
questions,
so.
comments? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
I make a motion to approve and to extend archery hunting on certain town-owned land for 1 year in accordance with provisions in Ordinance 100, TAC 018, in accordance with providing archery hunting on certain town-owned lands.
Second.
So this is administrative. The ordinance requires us to renew this once a year. We're actually a little bit late. It was supposed to be done in December, but overtaken by the...
And all going well, Mayor, on
It
this?
is, it is. People have, residents have enjoyed and appreciated that opportunity for access to these natural resources, and they have fed their families as well.
That was going to be my next question. Any other questions? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan?
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Mr. Soms heard your comment. I just got a pay from him.
That's okay. He's watching because I made a comment earlier and he says, go talk to so-and-so.
So, we voted on it, right? Yes,
Yes.
motion carries. Okay, thank you all for your patience. This was one of our longer meetings. We will work on perhaps a resolution in regards to the comments this evening, and we will see what the best way to move from here is. But I appreciate all of your comments, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion is made.
Yeah.
Sitting here,
Oh, yeah.
Getting creeks up.